ABC News Live.
Tonight, Biden addresses the nation. The President of the United States prepares to speak to the country just days after announcing his withdrawal from the 2024 race, giving his endorsement to Vice President Kamala Harris. What we can expect from the president tonight as he looks to cement his legacy for decades to come, while top Republican leaders are calling for his resignation now. We'll hear from one of those leaders when the number 3 in the House, Congressman Tom Emmer, joins. Plus, the disruption felt on Capitol Hill as thousands of protesters demonstrated against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress, the tense moments and the message Netanyahu delivered to the American people. And
the shooter was flying the drone around the area.
The Trump rally shooting may have been one of the biggest failures of the U.S. Secret Service in decades, but we're now learning more about the alleged shooter behind the carnage as the FBI director briefed the nation's leaders, drawing a picture of a loner with few contacts, how he was able to conceal his weapon, even the online searches that are now pointing to a potential motive. Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us tonight for our special coverage, President Biden, the decision. In 1 hour, the president will address the nation about his unprecedented move to step aside, ending his bid for re-election. It's the first time in more than 50 years an incumbent president has chosen not to run. We've been told the president will speak from the heart tonight. And in addition to naming some of his administration's successes, he's also expected to talk about what he aims to do to, quote, finish the job in the final 6 months of his term. The president says he's determined to get as much done as he can at home and abroad, including negotiating a ceasefire in Gaza and a hostage deal. The speech is a culmination of Biden's more than 5 decades in public service. Back in 2020, he said he viewed himself as a bridge, not as anything else, and that there's an entire generation of leaders who are the future of this country. And to finish the job, Biden is also determined to campaign to get Vice President Kamala Harris elected as the 47th president of the United States. We'll carry the president's historic speech live right here at 8 p.m. Eastern. Our team is standing by to discuss what it all means. Our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, leads us off tonight from the White House.
Tonight, President Biden in the Oval Office, coming before the American people, explaining for himself why he dropped out of the race and making one thing clear: his presidency is not over yet.
He wants to finish the job that he started.
Sources tell us the president is well aware that this is a moment for the history books. He started writing these remarks while he was still at home recovering from COVID. Tonight, still putting on the finishing touches. In excerpts released by the White House, Biden will say, "I have decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That is the best way to unite our nation." His message to the American people: the great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule. The people do. History is in your hands. The power is in your hands. The idea of America lies in your hands. With 6 months left, Biden plans to outline his agenda for the rest of his term. One top priority: doing everything he can to help Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump. With Biden passing the torch, tonight Harris with this salute.
He has extraordinary determination and profound compassion for the people of our country.
Just 3 days into her campaign, Harris today addressing a large gathering of one of the nation's historically black sororities, knowing well that black women could determine this race.
Now, in this moment, our nation needs your leadership once again. In this moment, I believe we face a choice between 2 different visions for our nation. One focused on the future, the other focused on the past. And with your support, I am fighting for our nation's future.
She only mentioned Trump by name once, but the central theme of her campaign now coming into focus. Harris arguing Trump represents the past and she is the future.
Across our nation, we are witnessing a full-on assault on hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. The freedom to vote, the freedom to be safe from gun violence, and the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government telling her what to do. These extremists want to take us back, but we are not going back. We are not going back.
So many adamant about that. Mary Bruce joins us now from the White House. Mary, what are you hearing in terms of possible considerations for Harris's running mate?
Well, Lindsay, we do know that the vetting process now is already underway. A source familiar with the process tells me that the pool of potentials who are now being vetted is roughly 12 people under consideration to be Kamala Harris's running mate. We know the names of at least 4 people on that list, those battleground state contenders, Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, also those red state governors, Roy Cooper of North Carolina, Andy Beshear of Kentucky. Now, this list, of course, could change and likely, I'm sure, will. One other thing we now know, the timing. Kamala Harris is expected and planning to make her announcement, announce her running mate before August 7th. That's the date of that virtual roll call to make her nomination official, Lindsay.
It'll be very soon. All right, Mary Bruce from the White House. Thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you.
Former President Trump is back on the campaign trail for the first time since Joe Biden stepped aside from his re-election bid. Visiting North Carolina tonight, Trump is now shifting his attacks to his new opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris. ABC's Rachel Scott is in Charlotte with more.
Tonight in battleground North Carolina, Donald Trump's supporters lining up. His first campaign appearance since Sunday's political earthquake. President Biden out of the race. Vice President Kamala Harris, now Trump's new opponent. Trump, who spent years attacking Biden, now quickly trying to recalibrate to focus on Harris, zeroing in on her role in the administration. Harris tasked with addressing the root causes of migration at the southern border.
She knew nothing about the border. The border is the most devastating thing to happen to this country in so long.
But several Republican members of Congress now taking aim at Harris's identity as the first woman of color to serve as vice president, labeling her a DEI hire, shorthand for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I think she was a DEI hire.
100%. She was a DEI hire.
Sources tell ABC News House Speaker Mike Johnson has privately warned Republicans to stop.
This is not personal with regard to Kamala Harris, and her ethnicity or her gender have nothing to do with this whatsoever.
Today in the New York Times, Hillary Clinton writing, "This is a race Democrats can and must win." But Clinton adding, "I know a thing or two about how hard it is for strong women candidates to fight through sexism and double standards of American politics." Noting Harris will face unique additional challenges as the first Black and South Asian woman to be at the top of a major party's ticket. And on social media, Clinton showing this 2021 clip of Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, disparaging Harris for not having children.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
Hillary Clinton's reaction, what a normal, relatable guy who certainly doesn't hate women having freedoms. But here in North Carolina, Trump supporters we spoke to say they're worried about the new excitement Harris could bring to the race.
So you think it could be more of a challenge for Trump that Harris is on the ticket?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think Harris will. Like I say, I think she'll bring new life into the party for the Democrats. And looking at, the last couple of weeks or couple of months especially, how everything's gone haywire, they're going to try to find unity in it. And I think that she'll, give them that lift.
A lot of energy and enthusiasm from both parties about their candidates. Rachel Scott joined us now. Rachel, this is, of course, the first time that we're seeing Donald Trump since Kamala Harris became his opponent. How has his campaign adjusted?
Yeah, well, Lindsay, this is going to be a major shift for both Donald Trump and his campaign because he wanted to run against President Biden. In fact, he has spent days on social media still attacking the president, even though he has already dropped out of the race. So tonight, Donald Trump on the stage behind me, he's now trying to switch gears and focus on attacking the vice president, going after her on immigration and the border. Lindsay, I will tell you, he has mentioned her name more than a dozen times already tonight. He's mispronounced it every single time. Lindsay.
Interesting. All right, Rachel Scott, our thanks to you. Joining us now for more is Majority Whip of the House, Tom Emmer. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Congressman. It's certainly been a busy day on Capitol Hill, and we'll try and get to it all. We spoke to you last week from the RNC. A lot has happened since then. First, as we're set to hear from President Biden at the top of the hour, your reaction to his decision to not run for re-election.
Well, I think he got knifed by Obama, and he was pushed over the cliff by Nancy Pelosi. I'm not sure what we're going to hear tonight. I don't expect him to veer away from his vitriol and his divisive approach that he took at the State of the Union, that I would argue goes all the way back to his inauguration. But we'll see. He has made the announcement. It's very interesting that you send it out by tweet or email, however they delivered it, and you wait 3-4 days before you address the American people. It just shows the kind of chaos they have in the White House.
But in fairness, he did have COVID during that time that he sent it out. But we'll move beyond that. You, House Speaker Mike Johnson, and other congressional Republicans have called on the president to step down from office, arguing that if he can't run for president, he shouldn't serve as president. Is there anything that President Biden could say tonight that might dissuade you from calling for his resignation?
Well, Lindsey, let's keep in mind, we're told he had COVID, and I've got to believe that. But you could certainly do a presentation from wherever you're at and beam it into all the TVs across the country. It still is quite bizarre that we're waiting 3 or 4 days for some type of passing the torch campaign speech, which is conveniently placed on the same day that Prime Minister Netanyahu is in Washington, D.C. to defend Israel's actions to defend itself.
So is there anything that he could say that might convince you that he should remain president for the next 6 months?
Actually, when it comes to where Joe Biden is, it's really interesting because depending on what he says, it probably doesn't matter. 3.5 years, this has been covered up, Lindsey. And we've got Ms. Harris, who is now the candidate, apparently. She's got to be confirmed by a virtual convention on August 7th. But she's been there for the entire 3.5 years. There is no light between these two people. In fact, now we know with his incompetence that it's very likely that it's been Kamala Harris that has been running the country for the last 3.5 years.
As you just heard moments ago, we've seen some members of your conference already make references to VP Harris's race when talking about her bid for the White House, calling her the DEI candidate. Rachel Scott has reported House Republican leaders have privately told the conference to focus attacks against VP Harris on her record, not her race or gender. What's your message publicly to any member of your conference who makes reference to her race and gender?
Kamala Harris is the most liberal progressive when she was in the Senate. Kamala Harris was the deciding vote for the $1.9 trillion spending bill that kicked off the inflation that Americans have been dealing with for the last 3.5 years. 20% increase in inflation in 3.5 years, $1,000 a month more that Americans pay on a monthly basis. Lindsey, it's about the economy. Hey, Kamala, where are the pro-growth policies? Donald Trump has done it. Kamala Harris, I would argue, has been at the helm of one of the worst economies for middle class and Americans that are trying to climb the economic ladder. She's caused this inflation, and she's going to own it. And the border was hers, too. That's what you should be talking about.
So, but just to be clear, one of your colleagues said that the fact that she's not a white man is not a winning strategy. Do you agree that the idea of her race and gender, that those should be off limits on the campaign trail?
I will be very clear. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, this country cannot live with another 4 years of their failed economic policies. They cannot live with another 4 years of a wide open southern border that has left tens of millions and terrorists come across our southern border. And we can't live with this feckless foreign policy that has created all these fires around the world and conflicts that need to be resolved quickly so people can get back to living in peace. Are you better today than you were 4 years ago? Absolutely not.
So her race and gender should not be brought up?
Again, she is the epitome of a failed economic agenda, and it has caused the border crisis that we have, the invasion that we've got on our southern border. Her record is the reason that she is not fit to be the president of the United States.
We know that Donald Trump said that he wanted Biden to run, that he's the candidate he prepared to run against. Do you think that Kamala Harris is more difficult to beat? Some of the polls seem to suggest that's the case.
Well, you guys all have different things that you want to look at. Bottom line is, Americans know that Kamala Harris has been at the helm for the last 3.5 years. This economy that doesn't work for everyone, Lindsey. There's a group of people in this country that inflation is affecting in a very personal way, in a difficult way. They're having to make choices about what they feed their families, and that is all on Kamala Harris and this failed economic agenda. No, I don't think it's any different. Contrary to what your previous report was, there is no difference between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris except for age.
On Capitol Hill today, we saw FBI Director Wray testify about the attempted assassination on former President Trump, detailing how the shooter flew a drone for 11 minutes the day of the shooting. As we learn more, I'm curious, what disturbs you the most about what you've seen and heard?
So far, there are just too many questions that need to be answered. But if it's true, the timeline that we've been given, that they identified a potential shooter at least 10 to 15 minutes before Donald Trump took the stage, Lindsey, I think all of us have to ask, why was he on that stage in the first place?
And finally, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was on the Hill today addressing Congress. Former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi did not attend, saying it was, quote, by far the worst presentation of any foreign dignitary invited and honored with the privilege of addressing the Congress of the United States. Your response to what you heard today?
Well, Nancy wasn't listening. Benjamin Netanyahu did an amazing job of coming in and saying, this is what we're responding to: barbarianism, raping Israeli women, killing parents in front of their children, killing children in front of their parents. He went back through what October 7th was all about. He said, we are ready for peace if Hamas will put down their weapons and release the hostages. Until then, he's committed to the mission, and then he told us why it's important to us. Quite frankly, the fact that Kamala Harris thinks she has some ability to be the leader of the free world and she chose not to be there today, Lindsey, is disgusting and wrong. And it's another reason why she is not at all prepared to be the United States of America, President of the United States of America.
Though she is planning on meeting with him tomorrow.
Oh, that's great. I mean, you make a public statement by not showing up for an address of a joint session of Congress. It's disgusting, and people should not let her off the hook. She's anti-Israel, and meeting with him after the fact, that's great.
Majority Whip of the House, Tom Emmer, we thank you so much for your time, Congressman.
Thank you, Lindsey.
Biden's speech tonight is, in some ways, his chance to write the first draft of his own legacy. For what to expect as he makes that case, we want to bring in Terry Zuplatt, former Obama speechwriter and author of the upcoming book, Say It Well. Terry, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You were on the inside of the Obama-Biden White House. What do you expect to hear from the president in his speech tonight?
Well, in some ways, he started to telegraph his speech in the letter that he released when he made his announcement. And you know, as speechwriters, we always tend to think of a speech as a story. And in this case, there's probably perhaps four big parts of this story that we'll hear tonight. First, we'll probably hear President Biden recount his achievements, which are significant. The first step in reminding people of his legacy. Secondly, I think he'll explain, his decision. And I think he can do that in real personal terms. So one of the things that President Biden is very effective at is tying his own personal story to the story of his service. And so I think one of the things I write about in the book is that our best speeches, our best presentations, whether we're President of the United States or our family members are speaking up at work, is when we speak from the heart. And so I would expect and hope that the president is really going to speak from the heart tonight. Third, I think he'll still be president for 6 months. He's going to outline what he still wants to get done. And finally, and probably most importantly, he's going to frame this election, frame this moment in American history as a defining moment for our democracy. And that's the reason that he's endorsed Kamala Harris.
I know you've previously said that speechwriters are always looking back to previous speeches for guidance, but is there a comparable moment to reference in modern history?
Well, of course, everyone's talking about, what happened nearly 60 years ago. But I would suspect that the president, his advisors, and his speechwriters probably went back and looked at the first time this happened, first time that a president chose not to run for re-election, which is George Washington. And I have to say, I've been writing speeches for nearly 30 years. I've actually never read that speech. I did go back the other day and read it. It's more than 6,000 words long, which is probably why I didn't read it. But there's some really beautiful parts to it. And there's a line that stood out to me that he said he was choosing not to run again because of the debt of gratitude to which he owed his beloved country. What a spirit, what a sentiment. And I would imagine we're going to see that sentiment tonight and hear that tonight from President Biden as well.
If you'd written President Biden's speech tonight, which themes would you want to underscore?
You know, no speech exists in isolation. It's rare that a president gets up and gives a speech that you've never heard before. Good speech writing, good rhetoric, and presidents do this. They're sort of the latest chapter in a book. And so the themes that I would assume you'd hear from President Biden tonight are the themes you've heard from him throughout his presidency, throughout his candidacy, throughout his life. He's prided himself on someone who's tried to bring the country together, who's tried to appeal to people on both sides of the aisle. Obviously, we live in an incredibly divisive time, but this basic spirit of unity, again, this was something else that George Washington spoke about in his farewell address, the dangers of excessive partisanship, the dangers of fractionalism. So much of what he predicted and what he feared we're living through right now. So this really is a chance for President Biden, I think, to give a speech for the ages. This could be the speech that people look back on when they look back on his presidency. And so it's an important moment for him. It's an important moment for the country. And I would just say it's just an important human moment. I mean, I put aside Republican, Democrat for a moment. This is someone who has dedicated his entire life to service of the nation, and he made the profoundly difficult decision to walk away from it. And by all accounts, he still believes he could win. He still believes he could do a good job. And so yet he's willing to do this for the sake of the country. And I think that's something to be applauded, no matter what our politics are. This could be an American moment, and it could go down in history as one of the great speeches.
Terry Zuplatt, we thank you so much for your time. And Terry's forthcoming book, Say It Well, hits shelves on September 17th. And with just minutes until the president delivers that primetime address to the nation, sources tell ABC News the president is well aware that this is a moment for the history books. He started writing these remarks while he was still at home recovering from COVID. Tonight, still said to be putting on the finishing touches. Joining us now is ABC's senior national correspondent, Terry Moran. Terry, talk to us about President Biden from a historical perspective.
Well, it's historical because there haven't been many presidents who've declined to run for office for a second term when they had the opportunity to do so. But also he stood in the breach, right? The Trump movement, which obviously is in charge of the Republican Party today as well, but he denied President Trump his second term at that point, and I think Democrats will always be grateful for that. Now let's see if they can hold on to that achievement as Trump runs against Kamala Harris. But I'm looking for a couple things out of the speech tonight. One, I think President Biden has to convince many Americans that he is fit for the job for the next 6 months. Obviously, he's being attacked by Republicans who say if you can't campaign, you can't serve. But more deeply than the partisan attacks, people have been concerned now for months about his age and about his condition as they've seen him. So I think that's one thing he has to do. The other thing he has to do is vouch for Kamala Harris. He's passing the torch tonight. How does he describe her? She is really, in many ways, an unknown quantity politically to many, many people. This will be her real introduction by someone who they do know and many do trust, especially Democrats. I think those are the two big points he's got to hit in the speech.
And I know that you spoke with some Nikki Haley primary voters in Wisconsin last week before it was announced that Biden was going to be stepping aside from the race. What did they tell you about where they stood on Kamala Harris?
Yeah, it was really interesting, Lindsay. We talked to people in Wisconsin, then we went across the lake to Michigan and on to Pennsylvania, those three big swing states, talking to people about what they'd seen and what they'd hoped for. And it was very interesting for Nikki Haley voters, for all voters, when you mentioned Kamala Harris, they were willing to give her a look. No one really said, well, I don't want any part of a Kamala Harris presidency. Americans are fair-minded. They don't know her. These days and weeks, but really days, are absolutely critical as she becomes defined in the public mind. I think that's a huge part of the president's speech, as I said, and she's got a job listening to voters. They're saying, well, if Biden does step aside, we'll take a look. Even the Haley voters that we talked to, the people who are strong on the opposite side of the abortion issue from Kamala Harris, they describe themselves as pro-life. But they are willing to listen because I think nobody really wanted a rerun of Trump and Biden. The polls showed that Americans were dissatisfied with their choices, and you heard it from voters all the time. And so a fresh face in the campaign, she'll get a long look from Republicans as well as Democrats.
All right, Terry Moran, our thanks to you for your insight as always. Now to chilling new details in the investigation into the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Today, the FBI director revealed the gunman signed up to attend the rally 1 week before the shooting and that he also researched the Kennedy assassination on that very same day, asking how far Lee Harvey Oswald was from JFK. ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas has that for us tonight, and we should also warn you some of the imagery you see may be graphic.
There's a ladder right here.
Tonight, the chilling new video obtained by ABC News, showing the frantic moments after the attempted assassination of former President Trump. You see officers climbing to the roof, finding the shooter's lifeless body, about 400 feet from the stage.
We have one shooter deceased. I think it's 3 victims.
And stunning new details. FBI Director Christopher Wray on the Hill today, revealing Thomas Matthew Crooks' search for information about the JFK assassination 1 week before the rally in Pennsylvania, the very same day he signed up to attend the rally.
On July 6th, he did a Google search for, quote, how far away was Oswald from Kennedy?
Ray saying on the day of the rally, the gunman flew a drone for 11 minutes, apparently to survey the site, 2 hours before opening fire.
The shooter was flying the drone around the area, not over the stage, I would say about 200 yards, give or take, away.
Officer. And as questions remain over the failure to spot the shooter's assault-style rifle, tonight officials saying that gun, also seen in this helmet video, had a collapsible stock, making it easier to conceal and carry.
Pierre Thomas joins us now. Pierre, what did the FBI director say about a possible motive in this case?
Well, he didn't give a motive today, but he said he's worried about the potential for more political violence and the potential for terrorism, domestic and international, right here at home, Lindsay.
Has he suggested that he's concerned about a possibility for more political violence as we get closer to November?
He indeed did. And Lindsay, he even said that he's worried that ISIS could conduct the same kind of attack that they conducted in Moscow at that concert hall only a few weeks and months ago.
All right, Pierre Thomas for us. Thanks so much, Pierre. Still much more to get to here on Prime tonight. Coming up, hundreds of passengers evacuated at one of the nation's busiest airports after an escalator fire. But next, a fiery speech on Capitol Hill from Israel's Prime Minister. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called it by far the worst yet from a foreign dignitary. And as we head to break, taking a live look now from the White House, where President Biden is set to address the nation in less than an hour. Keep it right here on ABC News Live as we bring you special live coverage of his Oval Office address at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Whenever news breaks.
We are here in Israel, a nation at war after that brutal surprise attack by Hamas.
On the ground in Ukraine, reporting from Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this little town.
From the most devastating disaster in Hawaii.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
In Iceland, let's go.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
From the front lines, from southern Israel.
Outside the Gaza Strip.
In Beirut.
From the FBI.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is. We're going to take you there.
You're streaming.
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
Susan Powell was a young, beautiful mother. She just one night vanished.
Where is Susan?
July 29th, making sure that if something happens to me, our assets are documented.
Josh, did you kill your wife? I'll never forget the first time that I met him. A chill just raced up through my spine. I just shook the hand of a killer.
Now, stunning details.
He ends up revealing the biggest bombshell.
What will happen next? 2020, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different.
The critics agree.
Hated the Brat Pack. What a
disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense?
I mean, I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything.
Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium.
1985? I think we could have.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right.
All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking.
My stomach just dropped.
He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, A Father's Secret, the all-new season on Hulu.
All right, let the dogs out, please.
I don't think he's going to give you a hard time.
Even if he gives me a hard time, I'm the right guy. I want to make sure that we all learn together.
Calm, confident.
Calm, confident, calm, surrender.
Everything that he's taught has become a reality.
Yeah.
We are so grateful and impressed. I feel like crying. You changed our world.
It is a beautiful thing to see. As you rehabilitate the dog, you also rehabilitate you.
Welcome back, everyone. Looking at live pictures now of the White House, where President Biden is expected to speak to the American people in an Oval Office address just minutes from now. His first national remarks since he decided to withdraw from the 2024 presidential race. We'll bring you his remarks in a special report shortly. But before we return to the president's speech, the other big story in Washington tonight, the address from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu before Congress, making the case for continued U.S. support for Israel in their war against Hamas. He was met with a warm welcome, but dozens of lawmakers were no-shows, including Vice President Harris and Senator J.D. Vance, while outside pro-Palestinian protesters clashed with police. Matt Gutman has that covered, but we begin with our chief global affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz.
It was a thunderous, largely Republican welcome, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu offering a full-throated defense of Israel's war in Gaza and no mention of a ceasefire.
Our enemies are your enemies. Our fight is your fight, and our victory will be your victory.
There was a sizable contingent of Democrats in the chamber, but dozens of high-profile lawmakers, including Nancy Pelosi, skipped the event. Vice President Kamala Harris, who would normally preside, and Senator J.D. Vance not in attendance due to scheduling conflicts. Netanyahu tried to bridge the divide in an emotional moment, introducing rescued hostage Noah Argamini, who had been seized during the horrific October 7th Hamas massacre. The Israeli leader praising not only President Biden, who traveled to the war zone just days after the attack.
I thank President Biden for his heartfelt support for Israel after the savage attack on October 7th. He rightly called Hamas sheer evil.
But former President Trump as well.
I also want to thank President Trump for all the things he did for Israel.
Yet it is clear why Netanyahu came. With more than 39,000 Palestinians killed by the Israelis in Gaza, according to the Hamas Health Ministry, and hundreds of thousands facing starvation, Netanyahu is appealing to Americans to stand firm in what he frames as a battle between good and evil.
Israel will fight until we destroy Hamas's military capabilities, end its rule in Gaza, and bring all our hostages home.
A very defiant Netanyahu today. Martha Raddatz joins us now. Martha, we know that President Biden and Vice President Harris were not there today, but they are planning on meeting with Netanyahu separately tomorrow. Do we know anything about those meetings?
Well, the only thing we really do know, Lindsay, is that they are separate meetings between the vice president and the president, but he is also flying down to Mar-a-Lago after that, where he will be meeting with Donald Trump. This all comes while a U.S. official says there are some serious negotiations going on that are going well to free the hostages. Lindsay?
All right, Martha Raddatz, our thanks to you. Thousands gathered in Washington to protest the Israeli prime minister's address and demand an end to the war in Gaza. What began as a peaceful march for some turned violent. Matt Gutman is there.
Tonight, as Israel's prime minister was addressing Congress, just blocks away, clashes erupting between some pro-Palestinian protesters and the police.
Right now, these protesters are trying to break through this line of police.
There was shoving, projectiles were thrown, and Capitol Police deployed pepper spray, saying protesters failed to obey police orders to retreat. It had started peacefully, thousands thronging the Capitol Hill area, demanding an end to the war in Gaza and Benjamin Netanyahu's arrest. Blocking their route to the Capitol, where Netanyahu was speaking, were miles of barricades backed by thousands of officers, including SWAT teams. The march stalling at Union Station, where protesters began pulling American flags down from the flagpoles. Officers moved in and were swarmed by the crowd.
The flag there on the ground was on the flagpole here at Union Station a few moments ago, but protesters here lit it on fire, as well as that effigy of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Police eventually removing the Palestinian flags raised above Union Station.
Matt Gutman joins us now. And Matt, just at a minimum, it looks like there's a lot of graffiti where you are.
Yeah, Lindsay, before they left, the protesters defaced that Liberty Bell and the memorial behind me. There are a few stragglers left here from the protest. And for the most part, during the day, they marched demanding an end to the war in Gaza, an end to the blockade, and the arrest of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But organizers are telling me that this was a trial run. They're calling this the summer of resistance, and they say we're going to see more of this and bigger numbers at the DNC in Chicago next month. Lindsay.
The summer of resistance. Matt Gutman, our thanks to you. Here in New York, chaos at JFK Airport after an escalator fire triggered alarms and sent smoke into the terminal. Some people were even taken to the hospital. ABC's Trevor Ault is at JFK tonight.
Tonight, that alarming scene for travelers as smoke filled a terminal at New York's JFK Airport. Authorities say the fire sparked up on an escalator around 7:15 this morning. With alarms blaring, Nate Peckinpah recording this video, revealing the cloud of smoke down the hallway. Passengers covering their faces as the smoke billowed into the terminal. 9 treated for smoke inhalation. At least 4 had to be taken to the hospital.
So I'll be late getting to California. Apparently it was an escalator that caught on fire.
He and nearly 1,000 other people filing down the stairs, packing the tarmac, met by firefighters and emergency vehicles. It happened in Terminal 8, home to American Airlines, but multiple airlines were impacted. In total, more than 200 flights delayed. The incident comes as airlines finally recover after thousands of flights were scrapped over the past several days due to Friday's tech meltdown.
Our thanks to Trevor. I-95 remains shut down in Wilson County, North Carolina, following a devastating crash. At least 5 people were killed in a collision involving 2 tractor trailers and 2 passenger vehicles. One of the trucks went up in flames. Traffic is still backed up for miles. Telecommunications and internet services are still partially down in Bangladesh today following more than a week of chaos and deadly violence. Nearly 200 deaths were reported, along with nearly 2,700 arrests following protests over government job quotas that spiraled into violence. The protests were triggered largely by students who were furious about the unemployment crisis there. Offices and banks opened for a few hours in Dhaka today, but authorities said a curfew would continue until the situation improves. So much more to get to here on Prime tonight. Coming up, we head to Capitol Hill, where GOP leaders at the highest level say President Biden must step aside now. But could tonight's speech change anything? Next, breaking down Biden's presidency by the numbers, the highs and lows. Another look from the nation's capital as we count down the minutes to President Biden's Oval Office address. Special live coverage and analysis right here on ABC News Live Prime. Stay with us.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
An operation to capture ISIS fighters.
Is this our Combat Operations Center?
We're approaching the gate now. Militants came in from 4 or 5 different directions.
Operational nuclear reactor.
So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag, there's not a tear in it.
Not a tear in it. How important is this label right here, Made in the USA?
Look at your smile. You're proud of this.
I love this.
Great work.
Hi.
Where are you? Where are you?
Appreciate you.
Thank you, David. Good to meet you. Ismail? David.
David.
Yes. I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
They call him the beauty queen killer. He's targeting young women in malls.
I am single. I want to enjoy the company of a member of women.
He tortured me.
How did she survive 9 days of terror?
The word accomplice came up. Nobody knows the real story.
The Beauty Queen Killer, only on Hulu.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different. If you could have the Brat Pack name not exist, would you?
I hated the Brat Pack. What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense? Andrew?
I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything.
Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium.
1985, I think we could have.
Let's go.
The ship is incredible. It feels like living in a science fiction movie.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Wow, look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, dead ahead. Tag on!
We are heading into the unknown.
Hammer, hammer, hammer. It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Start Here.
Hey, good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Are you ready? Covering the biggest events in the country right now.
There's a lot going on here this morning. You don't just see it, you feel it.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
I'll be here.
I am here and so happy.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
Michael, George, Clara, Ginger.
Reporting from the floor of the Republican National Convention, I'm Rachel Scott. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Welcome back, everyone. Joe Biden's tenure as the 46th president began January 20th, 2021. Let's take a look at the administration's highs and lows by the numbers. With nearly 26,000 weekly deaths in the U.S. at the time Joe Biden taking office coincided with the worst peak of COVID deaths of the pandemic. Driven by COVID-19 and snarled supply chains, consumer prices and inflation surged early in his term. But since 2021, the economy has added nearly 11 million jobs, and the unemployment rate has come down to 3.5%, the lowest in 50 years. He signed 140 executive orders, including a $1 trillion infrastructure package that broadened access to the internet. And Biden's Inflation Reduction Act created 20 tax incentives for clean energy and manufacturing. His CHIPS and Science Act invested $52 billion to build factories and make computer chips domestically. Since January of 2022, the U.S. has provided $78 billion in military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. That's according to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy. And yet another foreign conflict, the war in Gaza. The U.S. has spent $12.5 billion on military aid to Israel since October 7th last year. But 36%, that's Biden's approval rating for the first 3 weeks of July, according to Gallup. And that is an all-time low for President Biden, though Americans may one day look back more kindly on the president's now sole term in office, as it often happens. So much more to get to here on Prime tonight. Coming up, a presidential historian weighs in on how we're witnessing something we haven't seen since the 1960s, a president opting to not seek a second term. Plus, how Biden's legacy could be impacted by Donald Trump's time in office. We're now roughly at the 30-minute mark until Americans all across the country will hear from President Biden at the White House. Keep it right here for a special live coverage, 8 p.m. Eastern, with full analysis to follow.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember
that lives are changed. Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas, Edinburgh, Scotland, from Poland once again tonight. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. Do you think you'll ever be able to go back home? We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City. Splintered houses and splintered lives. The magnitude of the devastation. You're streaming ABC News Live. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Raleigh, North Carolina, the U.S. Capitol, Mayfield, Kentucky, Minneapolis, Mexico, Tongass National Forest, Alaska. Getting you behind the stories as they happen, giving you a front row seat to our world as it plays out in real time, live. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights, America's most honored streaming news program, only on ABC News Live. Streaming free right now wherever you stream your news.
Susan Powell was a young, beautiful mother. She just one night vanished.
Where is Susan? July 29th, making sure that if something happens to me, our assets are documented.
Josh, did you kill your wife? I'll never forget the first time that I met him. A chill just raced up through my spine. I just shook the hand of a killer.
Now, stunning details.
He ends up revealing the biggest bombshell.
What will happen next? 2020, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, a Father's Secret, the all-new season on Hulu.
All right, let the dogs out, please.
I don't think he's going to give you a hard time.
Even if he gives me a hard time, I'm the right guy. I want to make sure that we all learn together.
Calm, confident.
Calm, confident, calm, surrender.
Everything that he's taught has become a reality.
Yeah.
We are so grateful and impressed.
I feel like crying. You changed our world.
It is a beautiful thing to see. As you rehabilitate the dog, you also rehabilitate you.
When you hear that bell, you know GMA's surprising someone somewhere with real unclaimed money they never knew was there.
This really is a big check.
And this Friday morning, we're at it again.
Thank you. You did it. Show me the money.
On Good Morning America. GMA's surprised people across the country, helping find thousands in unclaimed money.
This really is a big check.
Yeah! And this summer, we're at it again.
That's incredible.
Because nothing's better than hearing you say,
Show me the money.
On Good Morning America.
Welcome back, everyone. We are now about 15 minutes away from President Biden's Oval Office address. Yet another momentous event in what has been a really surreal month in U.S. history. I want to bring in our White House correspondent, Mary Alice Parks. Mary Alice, what talking points can we expect from the president tonight?
Yeah, Lindsay, the White House saying that this is a moment for the president to try to unite the nation, that he's going to explain that he thinks it is time to pass the torch to a new generation, that is the best way to unite the country. Sources tell us the president is very aware that he is writing for the history books. Like you said, that this has been a surreal moment in American politics, in U.S. history. The president is aware of that, of just how extraordinary his decision is, and he needs to explain it to the American people. The White House gave us a few excerpts from the speech. He's expected to say, the defense of democracy is more important than any title. I draw strength and find joy in working for the American people, but this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me, it's about you. Lindsay, I think after the debate, there were a lot of Democrats, a lot of voters that wondered if this was inevitable. They watched that debate. They felt like the president struggled, didn't seem fit enough, didn't seem like he had the stamina to continue the job. But we heard the president himself insist for days after, for weeks after, that he wasn't going anywhere. So I think part of tonight is him explaining that whiplash and explaining how he came to this decision, Lindsay.
And you attended the White House press briefing earlier today. What did Secretary Jean-Pierre have to say about the pressure Biden faced to drop out?
Yeah, I asked her about that exactly. She said that it was a really hard decision for him, a personal decision. And she also talked about how the staff has felt immense pride in him, in his decision, in what she described as a selfless moment. It was interesting that she sort of dodged the idea that he might have been bullied out of the job and really dismissed questions about whether he was leaving the job solely because of health concerns. But I do think that the president is going to have to talk openly tonight about his health. Of course, some Republicans have called on him to resign, not just step out of the race, saying that if he doesn't feel like he's up to running, how do we know for sure that he's up for leading for the next 6 months? Again, like you said, the White House really responding to that by brushing it off, but I think that the president will have to address it himself, and he will have to find a way to sort of strike that balance between dismissing Republicans' concerns but not making this speech political. We are told it's not a political address tonight, but an address from the Oval Office to the American people.
Mary Alice Parks, our thanks to you as always. In our country's history, 15 vice presidents have advanced to the highest office and become president, but never quite like this. And as we're moments away from the president addressing the American people and laying out a transition of power, let's bring in former DNC chair and ABC News contributor, Miss Donna Brazile. And Donna, I just want to start right off with what you'd like to hear from President Biden tonight.
Well, Lindsay, I've been thinking all day about a man that I've gotten to know when I was 27 years old. I've known him for close to 37 years. He's an honorable man, a patriot. He's someone who has a deep love and devotion to his country. I want him to tell the American people that he's going to continue his work because he believes in freedom, because he values the rule of law. I want him to tell us that he is not going to stop working 24/7 on behalf of the American people. This is not a partisan address. This is a patriot address from a president who deeply cares about the future of our country.
Last week, when we were at the RNC, had a chance to interview Senator Marco Rubio, and he said at the time then, and this is before President Biden even had decided that he was going to step aside, he said that if he doesn't have the mental acuity to be the nominee, doesn't have the mental acuity to be the president and run the country now. Subsequently, we've heard a number of Republicans suggest the same, that he needs to resign from office. Your thoughts on those critics?
Well, let me just tell the critics very nicely. Joe Biden did not step aside. He had to pledge delegates to continue to fight. He had money in the bank, and he had an army of volunteers and patriots who were willing to fight with him. He decided to step back and give another generation the opportunity to serve our country. And for those Republicans and any other Americans who don't believe that Joe Biden has the mental, physical, and spiritual strength to continue to fight, well, you're going to see that tonight. He's not perfect. He never ran as a perfect president. He ran as a president for the people who wanted someone who would fight on their behalf. From leading us out of COVID, from bringing this country back on its feet in terms of jobs, this is a president who is proud of his service, and tonight you're going to see a man who cares deeply about his country. This is not someone who looks in the mirror and say, this is about me. This is a man who cares about America. I've lost my voice because I have just been talking to people who want to see Joe Biden continue to fight. I was one of those Americans who said if Joe wants to fight, Donna Brazile will fight with him. But Joe Biden decided to step back. He was not pushed aside. He was not thrown off the bus or rolled over. He's going to show tonight that he was a president willing to stand and fight, but he's stepping back. So a new generation will fight this battle, and we're going to fight it with the energy that Joe has put in us and the commitment to American values, the freedom, the rule of law. That's who Joe Biden is. That's the man I respect. That's the president that has served us well. We owe him a debt of gratitude.
A lot of the expectation is that much of his speech tonight will be about cementing his legacy, talking about the accomplishments of his administration. How much of it do you think is it about passing the torch now to Kamala Harris?
Absolutely. You know, when I think about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, when I think there are people in rural areas in this country today that are having Wi-Fi connected, when I think about the jobs that are being created in red states and blue states, manufacturing sector, when I think that inflation is coming down so people can go to the grocery store and buy the food that they need. This is a consequential president. And yes, he has endorsed Kamala Harris, and let me just say what the vice president's been doing. She's been earning the support of the American people, working with the delegates, working with the process. Today, the Rules Committee of the DNC passed the resolution. We know how we're going to proceed, and I think by the weekend, the Democratic Party is going to be unified, and we're ready to go. Let me just tell you, Joe Biden did not want to see a divided Democratic Party. He wanted to see a united Democratic Party, because without a united Democratic Party, we cannot reach out to the independents and the Republicans to bring the American people together. He's not going to preach unity on one night. He's not going to preach unity because he's accepting a speech. He's going to preach unity because he believes it in his heart. I have become more fierce in my determination to protect Joe Biden over the last couple of days, because I just remember the little kid from Louisiana that he said, "Come work with me." And I said, "I don't want to work with you just yet." And we've been friends, steadfast friends, for 37 years. I miss my time with him, having breakfast. He eat Irish oatmeal. I like my grits. I'm from the South. Yeah, he's an oatmeal guy. And I told the president, as soon as I can get back to Washington, I'm going to have breakfast with him, the old-fashioned way, the way we two Irish people like to have our breakfast.
Donna Brazil, good Irish woman that you are. Our thanks to you, as always.
Black Irish. Proud of it.
Now I want to bring in ABC's Jay O'Brien, who joins us from Capitol Hill. Jay, we've heard Republican after Republican, including at the highest level, say that President Biden stepping aside is not enough, that he must resign from office now. Can this Oval Office speech do anything to put that train back in the station?
Well, while we expect President Biden to deliver this message of unity, Lindsey, and to talk about his accomplishments and what he wants to accomplish over the next few months of his administration, I don't think there's anything he can say, to your point, that's going to change the calculus. And frankly, what we will see instead are some political divisions on display with the way that House Republicans and, frankly, Republicans of all stripes are expected to react to this. I can tell you that we have a number of high-profile lawmakers, Republicans, here on Capitol Hill who have already called on President Biden to step aside. One is Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Another is someone who you had on your air not long ago, Tom Emmer, the majority whip in the House of Representatives. Josh Hawley, a senator, and the list goes on of Republicans who have called on him to resign. And there is this split. There are the Democrats who say he is stepping aside because he doesn't think he can win November. He's making a selfless choice for the future of the party. And then there was the Republican argument that he's stepping aside because he doesn't necessarily have the gas in the tank to win in November in terms of ability. And while the White House disputes that and have said, look at his doctor's reports, look at his health history, things of that nature, Republicans are still pushing that narrative. Even Tom Emmer earlier tonight used the word cover-up with you. So that schism is very much going to be on display, and we do not expect these Republicans, no matter what President Biden says tonight, to stop those calls between now and really November.
Jay O'Brien, our thanks to you as always. And joining us now is presidential historian Mark Updegrove. Mark, thank you for joining us. The country is witnessing something we haven't seen since LBJ decided not to run for a second term back in 1968. What are some other similarities between then and now?
You know, that there are similarities and there are differences. The similarity is, of course, it's the last time, as you suggested, a sitting president opted not to accept the nomination of his party for another term in president. But the difference is this, Lindsey, that speech that LBJ made in 1968 was done on March 31st, and he neither sought nor chose to accept the nomination of his party for another term. Joe Biden sought the nomination. He got the nomination, and now he's declining to accept the nomination, and he's doing so at the end of July, not the end of March, well into the election cycle. So that's a major difference. But I think the other similarity is 1968. There are echoes of 1968 in 2024, a stream of unprecedented and dramatic events that kind of shake us to our core and wonder what's happening next. 1968 was what LBJ called the nightmare year because there was one thing after another. We are seeing that once again caught up in the currents, the rapid currents of history in 2024, Lindsey.
And one thing that really fascinates me, of course, the presidential debate in June was the earliest such debate ever. Do you think that historians might look back and say, if not for such an early debate, President Biden might have stayed in the race?
It's possible. There's the one thing about that debate, Lindsey, is it determined the fate of one of the political candidates. We really haven't seen that before, to the point where the candidate reevaluates his candidacy and says, I'm not the guy to steer this party forward, so I'm going to get out of the race. That's never happened before. You point out it happened early in the race. The Democrats may be happy about that, because had that performance happened at a later point, it might have been very difficult to recover from that point on, serve up a candidate who was viable and who was appealing to the electorate. So that might have been a twist of fate for the Democrats in this case, and an advantage as they go forward with a brand new candidate to whom Joe Biden passes the torch.
And just about a minute left, Mark, but Biden really seems to have been tortured over this decision for several days. How might history come to view his early departure?
Well, I think that history will see the wisdom in his opting not to seek the presidency again for another term, given what we saw in that performance earlier, that debate performance you mentioned, Lindsey. But I think ultimately we will see Joe Biden as a patriot who made the decision to put his country above himself, above his own political gain in this case. This is a guy who worked his whole life toward the acquisition and exercise of power. 36 years in the Senate, 8 years in the vice presidency, 3+ years in the presidency. And now he has an opportunity for one more term and decides that it's best for the country to step down. I think history will smile favorably on Joe Biden for making that decision.
Despite his low approval ratings now?
Despite his low approval, well, in part because of his low approval ratings. I think Joe Biden sees that he is not the guy to take the country forward. He got into the race in order to save democracy, and he's done an admirable job of that, but I think he sees that he's not the person to fulfill that going forward. Is Kamala Harris.
Presidential historian Mark Updegrove, we thank you so much for your time. That's our show for tonight. I'm Linsey Davis. Our special coverage of President Biden's Oval Office address starts right now with David Muir.
Tonight, President Biden addressing the nation from the Oval Office, the president's historic decision to withdraw from the race for the White House, his goals for his remaining 6 months in office, and his message tonight to a divided America. ABC News live coverage begins right now.
The ABC News special, President Biden, the decision, address to the nation. The president speaking for the first time since exiting the race for the White House, finished the job he started. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us on this historic night. We are just moments away from President Biden's Oval Office address to the nation. For the first time, he will speak to the American people about his very personal and likely wrenching decision to withdraw from the race for the White House. We are told that he will argue in his words that the defense of democracy is more important than any title, and he will outline his remaining 6 months in office. Pressure to drop out had been mounting for weeks following his alarming debate performance against Donald Trump. The president revealing his decision Sunday in a letter addressed to my fellow Americans, acknowledging, quote, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down. Tonight's address, a defining moment in his presidency, passing the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris, now the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee. The president will signal tonight he will now fight for his vice president. Let's listen to President Biden.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. In this sacred space, I'm surrounded by portraits of extraordinary American presidents. Thomas Jefferson wrote the immortal words that guide this nation. George Washington, who showed us presidents are not kings. Abraham Lincoln, who implored us to reject malice. Franklin Roosevelt, who inspired us to reject fear. I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think is more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union. It's not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. We can never forget that. And I never have. I've made it clear that I believe America is at an inflection point. One of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine our fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division. We have to decide, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect, freedom, justice, and democracy? In this moment, we can see those we disagree with not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. Can we do that? Does character in public life still matter? I believe I know the answer to these questions because I know you, the American people. And I know this, we are a great nation because we are good people. When you elected me to this office, I promised to always level with you, to tell you the truth. And the truth, the sacred cause of this country is larger than any one of us. And those of us who cherish that cause, cherish it so much, a cause of American democracy itself, must unite to protect it. You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now. Over the next 6 months, I'll be focused on doing my job as president. That means I'll continue to lower costs for hardworking families, grow our economy. I'll keep defending our personal freedoms and our civil rights, from the right to vote to the right to choose. I'll keep calling out hate and extremism. Make it clear there is no place in America for political violence or any violence ever, period. I'm going to keep speaking out to protect our kids from gun violence, our planet from climate crisis that is the existential threat. And I will keep fighting for my cancer moonshot so we can end cancer as we know it, because we can do it. I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform because this is critical to our democracy, Supreme Court reform. You know, I will keep working to ensure America remains strong and secure and the leader of the free world. I'm the first president in this century to report to the American people that the United States is not at war anywhere in the world. We'll keep rallying a coalition of proud nations to stop Putin from taking over Ukraine and doing more damage. We'll keep NATO stronger, and I'll make it more powerful and more united than any time in all of our history. I'll keep doing the same for our allies in the Pacific. You know, when I came to office, the conventional wisdom was that China would inevitably surpass the United States. That's not the case anymore. And I'm going to keep working to end the war in Gaza, bring home all the hostages, and bring peace and security to the Middle East and end this war. We're also working around the clock to bring home Americans being unjustly detained all around the world. You know, we've come so far since my inauguration. On that day, I told you, as I stood in that winter, we stood in a winter of peril and a winter of possibilities. Peril and possibilities. We were in the grip of the worst pandemic in the century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. But we came together as Americans, and we got through it. We emerged stronger, more prosperous, and more secure. Today, we have the strongest economy in the world, creating nearly 16 million new jobs, a record. Wages are up. Inflation continues to come down. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years. We're literally rebuilding our entire nation, urban, suburban, rural, and tribal communities. Manufacturing has come back to America. We're leading the world again in chips and science and innovation. We finally beat Big Pharma after all these years to lower the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. And I'm going to keep fighting to make sure we lower the cost for everyone, not just seniors. More people have health care today in America than ever before. And I signed one of the most significant laws helping millions of veterans and their families who are exposed to toxic materials. You know, most significant climate law ever in the history of the world. The first major gun safety law in 30 years. And today, the violent crime rate is at a 50-year low. We're also securing our border. Border crossings are lower today than when the previous administration left office. I've kept my commitment to appoint the first black woman to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. I also kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America and be a president for all Americans. That's what I've done. I ran for president 4 years ago because I believed and still do that the soul of America was at stake. The very nature of who we are was at stake. And that's still the case. America's an idea. An idea stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It's the most powerful idea in the history of the world. That idea is that we hold these truths to be self-evident. We're all created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We've never fully lived up to it, to this sacred idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I do not believe the American people will walk away from it now. In just a few months, the American people will choose the course of America's future. I made my choice. I've made my views known. I would like to thank our great Vice President, Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and a leader for our country. Now the choice is up to you, the American people. When you make that choice, remember the words of Benjamin Franklin that's hanging on my wall here in the Oval Office, alongside the busts of Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Cesar Chavez. When Ben Franklin was asked, as he emerged from the convention going on, whether the founders have given America a monarchy or republic, Franklin's response was, a republic, if you can keep it. A republic, if you can keep it. Whether we keep our republic is now in your hands. My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. Nowhere else on earth could a kid with a stutter, from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, one day sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. But here I am. That's what's so special about America. We're a nation of promise and possibilities, of dreamers and doers, of ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. I've given my heart and my soul to our nation, like so many others. I've been blessed a million times in return with the love and support of the American people. I hope you have some idea how grateful I am to all of you. The great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule, the people do. History is in your hands. The power is in your hands. The idea of America lies in your hands. We just have to keep faith, keep the faith, and remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's simply nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. So let's act together. preserve our democracy. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you.
A moment in history tonight. President Biden in the Oval Office. You heard him say there to the American people, I revere this office. I love my country more. He talked about this being not about me. It's about you. It's about we, the people. He said, we cannot forget that. I never have. He did ask this question. He says, does character in public life still matter as we head toward the November election? And he said nothing should come in the way of preserving democracy in this country. We do have our entire powerhouse political team here tonight. Let's get right to ABC's chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. And Mary, you had reported that this was a deeply personal decision. It was closely held, a very small group with him, including his wife, the First Lady, Jill Biden, that he began to come to this decision Saturday night. Then on Sunday made it official, calling the vice president, informing her of his plan to step aside in the race, then informing his immediate team, then just 1 minute later sending out that statement to the nation, my fellow Americans, it started. But tonight, Mary, he explained what he believes are the stakes in this election, and he argued for himself that in the end, President Biden believes that what is at stake here is actually larger than any title, larger than even staying in the race himself.
David, the president saying he has given his heart and his soul to this country, and he is doing that again by deciding to step out of this race. Listening to that speech, it felt very much like Joe Biden's love letter to the country that he has devoted his life and his career to serving, protecting, and defending. And you heard him say nothing can get in the way of saving our democracy, including personal ambition. You know, when he decided to run back in 2020, he did it promising to be a bridge, a transitional candidate to the next generation. But when he announced his reelection, he said he had to finish the job. Tonight, he is making it clear that finishing the job means he needs to pass on the torch. He needs to pass the baton and help Kamala Harris now win the White House, saying now is the time for the next generation. He is also, of course, making it clear his work is not done here. He has 6 more months left in office. He wants to use that time to help cement his legacy. But, David, the thing that Joe Biden will likely be most remembered for is this very moment. The way in which he is exiting this race. He did it in many ways to preserve his legacy, but David, it will likely be the thing that ends up defining it.
Well, Mary, I wanted to read you a statement moments ago that came in some color, in fact, if you will, from inside the White House. Someone inside this circle, the close circle, who has spent time with the president and the family over the last few days, the Biden family, telling ABC News tonight that the only thing I can say is, contrary to the reports I've heard, there is no anger, no remorse with the Biden family. There is only a deep sense of pride and an enormous amount of gratitude and appreciation for the overwhelming recognition of Biden as a true patriot and historic defender of democracy.
And David, I think that is a sentiment that is shared not only by the family, but also by the staff here at the White House. I can tell you that right now, there are about 500 members of the president's staff, people who have devoted so much time and energy to this administration and his fight for what the country can stand for. They are now right now huddled in the state dining room, in the East Room, watching these remarks all together, witnessing this history together, David.
No question, a difficult and challenging night for that team that has worked so closely with the president and even the Biden family themselves, having been able to get used to this decision over the evolution Saturday, Sunday, into early this week. It still must be profound to have watched Jill watch her husband and the rest of the family watch their father, their grandfather, deliver the news in that way tonight. Mary, thank you. Stay with us here. I know our coverage is going to continue. Mary's going to be back in just a moment, but I do want to bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. John, it's really impossible to overstate here how wrenching this decision must have been. You know, this is a president who for weeks, we saw it, we reported it here. He was determined to stay in this race, even under growing pressure to step down from the campaign, from some of the very Democratic leaders who were his partners in getting elected in 2020. What have you learned about what the turning point was for President Biden in eventually making this decision?
Well, and David, you know, you could hear it in what he said tonight. He believed that his record merited a second term. He did not want to make this decision. This was a decision that he was very much forced to make. He did it. There was nothing in that speech that suggested that he didn't believe that he could serve another 4 years. Nothing that suggested that his health would have gotten in the way. He said he did it because of party unity. The party needed to be unified. So in answer to your question, a critical moment in all of this, there are many critical moments, but perhaps most was a week ago Saturday when Chuck Schumer, the Senate leader, of course, remember, Joe Biden is a man of the Senate. He spent most of his life serving in the Senate. So when the Democratic leader of the Senate went to see him at Rehoboth Beach, and as we first reported, urged him to take this step in the name for his own good, for the good of his party, for the good of his country. I'm told that at the end of that meeting, Biden said to Schumer, "I need another week." And the two men hugged and went on. So it was exactly a week after that moment that Biden began the process of making that decision you heard Mary Bruce describe, of deciding to get out of this race, a decision he very much did not want to make.
And John, those deeply personal words near the top of what he said the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think is more important than any title.
Yeah, and he made the point, he used the phrase inflection point, that we're at an inflection point in our country where the decisions we make now, the things we do now, will impact the course of history for many years to come. I think that's almost certainly correct. But in terms of Biden's legacy, the question will be what happens now? Does Kamala Harris win in November? If she doesn't, people will look back at this moment and ask, why didn't Joe Biden do it earlier?
That would be the case, certainly, come November if they do not win in this election. John Carl, I know you're staying with us over the course of the hour as well. I wanted to also bring in ABC's Rachel Scott, covered the campaign trail, both the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign. And Rachel, obviously, as you heard John and Mary say there, this is going to be a legacy-defining moment for President Biden. He's thrown his full support in recent days and again tonight in front of the American people behind his vice president, Kamala Harris. You know, he said back in 2020 that he wanted to be a bridge to the next generation. Mary alluded to that, and it would appear that that's exactly what he's now trying to do here tonight.
Tonight, President Biden is that bridge to the next generation. He said tonight that it was time to pass the torch. He called it the best way to unite the nation. The president put it very bluntly. He said that there's a time and place for long careers, decades in politics, and that there's a time and place for fresh voices, fresh faces. And he said that time and place is right now. You know, David, as the president was speaking, I thought back to how President Biden once introduced Kamala Harris to the nation, saying that he was thinking about all the brown and black little girls out there that was seeing a black and South Asian woman in a new way, a way that they may have not ever seen before. Tonight, Kamala Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee, becomes the first black and South Asian woman on a major party ticket, David.
Rachel Scott with us here tonight for our coverage as well. Rachel, we'll see you shortly. With President Biden's decision on Sunday, it was nothing short of a political earthquake. The presidential race immediately upended. The Biden campaign, now the Harris campaign tonight. Two new national polls showing the race tightening already. The Reuters Ipsos poll actually has Vice President Harris leading Donald Trump by 2 points. Another new poll out tonight showing Donald Trump's national lead shrinking. Kamala Harris getting closer to Trump in that poll. Obviously, this is all still very early, and it will all come down to the battleground states. So Mary Bruce tonight on how this race has changed and quickly.
For Kamala Harris, a whirlwind transition from Joe Biden's loyal number 2 to the new standard bearer for the Democratic Party, their new hope for defeating Donald Trump.
Do we want to live in a country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law, or a country of chaos, fear, and hate?
It was just minutes after dropping out of the race that Biden anointed Harris his successor, giving her his full support and endorsement and telling Democrats it's time to come together. His campaign office becoming hers, the president phoning in these marching orders.
I'm hoping you'll give every bit of your heart and soul that you gave to me to Kamala.
And we've been Harris then taking the mic, but Biden still on the phone.
We love Joe and Jill. We really do. They truly are like family to us. And we do, everybody here does.
It's mutual.
I knew you were still there. You're not going anywhere, Joe.
I'm watching you, kid. I'm watching you, kid. I love you.
I love you, Joe. Oh.
The top Democrats in the country uniting behind her campaign. Within 48 hours, she had commitments from enough delegates to secure the nomination. More than $100 million in donations pouring in. And then she was off, hitting the campaign trail.
The path to the White House goes through Wisconsin.
her historic candidacy welcomed in battleground Wisconsin by the biggest crowd a Democrat has seen this cycle.
It's a her story moment, correction.
Her story?
Yes, and she will make it with our help.
Harris reintroducing herself to America as a former prosecutor ready to make the case against Trump.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
Her early message aimed squarely at the middle class.
Building up the middle class will be a defining goal of my presidency. Because here's the thing we all here, Wisconsin, know. When our middle class is strong, America is strong.
As vice president, Harris has been the administration's leading voice on an issue Democrats are counting on to energize voters in November, abortion. Now at the top of the ticket, she's doubling down.
Donald Trump, former president, handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court because he intended for them to overturn Roe v. Wade. Well, let me tell you something. When I am president of the United States, and when Congress passes a law to restore those freedoms, I will sign it into law. We are not playing around.
Let's get back to Mary Bruce at the White House. And Mary, you were in Milwaukee. You were inside that rally, the vice president's first campaign rally as the top of the ticket. Now the presumptive nominee, very different running for president than running as the running mate. Can you describe for the audience tonight what you witnessed in that room, any evolution you might have witnessed in the vice president? And the second part of my question is, Kamala Harris made it very clear that she believes she is uniquely qualified as a former prosecutor to make the case for the Democrats against Donald Trump.
David, she is in many ways now reintroducing herself to the American people. As you mentioned, they know her as vice president, as a running mate, but as the top of a ticket, that is a very different role. And you felt that in that room yesterday. The energy, the enthusiasm was palpable, and she also seemed different. She is trying to lean into this, obviously, in a different way. She is leaning into that history and experience of hers, reminding everyone that, yes, she was the former Attorney General of California, and she believes that she is uniquely qualified to prosecute the case against Trump. She's also going to have to reintroduce herself personally to the American people. I can tell you so many voters I talked to there yesterday, especially women, were extremely excited at the prospect of having a woman finally in the White House. But David, we are going to have to watch closely over the coming weeks and days to see how she distinguishes herself, how she may distance herself from the president. She has inherited his campaign, but so far the only real big difference is the messenger and how that message is being delivered.
Before I move on to this, all this talk about running mates, obviously everyone's reading the tea leaves out there. I wanted to ask you, Mary, about something you were telling us just a moment ago while that piece was playing on the air. You actually, at the end of the Oval Office address, thought you had heard applause coming from the White House.
David, you might be able to hear it right now. Behind me, massive applause and cheering from what I gather are those hundreds of staffers who were watching that address in the residence right now. And we heard what I know now is the president's voice saying hello, hello, hello as he walked into that space. He is now greeting his staff who love him very dearly, as you may be able to hear behind me.
Watching very closely each and every word in that Oval Office tonight. Mary, thank you. As I mentioned, the speculation is growing over Vice President Harris's short list of potential running mates. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, of course, a retired astronaut, a veteran, and married to former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. And Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, very popular in his home state, a key battleground, of course, Pennsylvania. You need to win the White House. Both are believed to be among the early favorites here. So tonight, Jonathan Karl is back with what we've learned so far about the potential contenders for running mate.
Now that she has the support of enough delegates to lock up the Democratic nomination, Kamala Harris has her first big decision to make, and she has to make it quickly, choosing a running mate. Vetting of potential candidates has already begun. Sources briefed on the process say there are at least 4 elected Democrats under consideration, including Josh Shapiro, the popular governor of must-win Pennsylvania, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, an astronaut and husband of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who survived an assassination attempt in 2011, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, a moderate and a rare Democratic governor in a red state, and North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, a moderate who has known Harris for some 20 years, going back to when she was the Attorney General of California and he was the AG of North Carolina.
North Carolina is in play. Donald Trump is obviously worried because he's coming to Charlotte today because he wants to try and shore up North Carolina, and I believe that we can win this state for Kamala Harris.
Today, Governor Shapiro reminded voters of just how important his state will be in November.
The road to the White House leads through Pennsylvania. And listen, it also doesn't take an expert to know the last 2 presidential races came down to a point or less. I expect this race will be close as well.
And as Harris undoubtedly knows, Shapiro himself won Pennsylvania 2 years ago in a 15-point landslide. As for Kentucky Governor Beshear, he's been elected twice in a state dominated by Republicans, and he's been showing he's ready to take on Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, offering something of a preview of a vice presidential debate.
J.D. Vance is a phony. He's fake. I mean, he first says that Donald Trump is like Hitler, and now he's acting like he's Lincoln. I mean, the problem with J.D. Vance is he has no conviction. But I guess his running mate has 34.
Senator Mark Kelly from border state Arizona is a moderate with a more conservative approach to the issue of securing the border, perhaps the biggest issue for Republicans. Today, ABC asked if he wanted to be Harris's running mate. He didn't directly answer.
You know, it's not about me. What is important here is we have an opportunity in November to make a really important choice. And the choice could not be more clear. Who should take this country into the forward? I don't want to see us go back to the past. This is a choice between a prosecutor, who's very experienced, works really hard, has done a great job, and a convicted felon.
Really interesting to watch these potential contenders be interviewed almost hourly with each day that passes. John Carl back with us tonight. And John, how soon could we see Kamala Harris choose a running mate?
Really soon, David. In fact, the virtual roll call where the party is to, at least under the current schedule, to formally pick their nominees for president, that'll be Kamala Harris, and vice president begins in a week, 1 week, and it ends on August 7th. What I am told is the goal is to have it done, have the choice done by August 7th. That would give them just 2 weeks to complete a process that in any other presidential cycle usually takes a matter of a couple of months.
So at this point, we think Kamala Harris and her running mate will know, the country will know by August 7th?
That's the plan right now, David, but we've never seen a running mate chosen on such a short timeline.
And John, I don't want to put you on the spot. You listed a number of potential contenders there. What are your sources telling you about who they might be leaning toward on that list?
I think that those 4 are at the top of the list. There are other names that certainly are being looked at, but Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, gives Kamala Harris the possibility, if the research, which undoubtedly they're doing right now, shows to win the state of Pennsylvania, if they think they can win Pennsylvania with Josh Shapiro, I think that puts him right near the top of that list. And you can say the same about Roy Cooper in North Carolina, another very key state. But I think all 4 of those names mentioned, are very much, very actively under consideration.
All right. John Carl with us again tonight. John, you know I'll likely ask you the same question again tomorrow night on World News. I'll see you then. In the meantime, I want to bring in the former head of the DNC, ABC News contributor Donna Brazil with me here tonight. And Donna, we all know, we're all students of history here. LBJ, March 1968, telling the nation that he would not seek a re-election. But this was different. Obviously, this is much closer to Election Day, hearing this message from the Oval Office and President Biden. And in deeply personal terms tonight, in modern American politics, have you ever seen anything like this?
No, I haven't, David. And look, I've been a student of American politics since I was 9 years old when I worked on my first campaign to get a playground in my neighborhood back in Kenner, Louisiana. It's an emotional night for me, David, for obvious reasons. Joe Biden has been one of those leaders in our country that have taken so many people over the bridge. His entire history in public service has been one of commitment to freedom and democracy and justice. And so for many of us, and those of us who have known Joe Biden for years, I've known him for 37 years, this sacrifice, this ultimate sacrifice of giving up power. I asked one of my friends, I said, have you ever seen a man give his power, give the torch to a woman and his bank chest? I mean, that's unusual. But this is because Joe Biden has been an unusual type of president. You talk about Lyndon Johnson. You talk about the signing of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Head Start program. And you talk about Joe Biden with building back a country that was on the brink. So this is an amazing moment. I know we have a tight timeline, but the thing the president said tonight, he talked about the joy he has in public service. I am so grateful that I know such a human being who puts his country ahead of his party and who will pass this torch to a tremendous proven leader. Kamala Harris is ready. She was ready on day one, and Joe Biden, when he selected her almost 4 years ago in August, he knew he wanted somebody to be prepared for this moment. She will meet the moment, and I'm so proud to have known Joe Biden as a leader, as a fighter, and I'm going to help him over the next 6 months.
You know, in watching this Oval Office address closely, Donna, I took note that this didn't seem to be a campaign speech tonight. This was not a rally. This was really, it seemed, a moment for the president to define his decision in his own terms, to explain why he believes the stakes are so great, this moment for democracy. He argued that's why he stepped aside in this race, that this was larger than any title, than himself, essentially, is what he came down to. And what do you make of this ABC News reporting at this hour that the characterization of the Biden family these last couple of days, a source saying that's not exactly the true reflection of how they feel tonight, that tonight they are, gratitude is the word for so many people in this country pointing to Joe Biden now and calling him a patriot who stepped in when democracy needed it?
What a beautiful family. His sister, I talked to his sister. I stay in touch with the family. I stay in touch with Dr. Biden. They're really a remarkable resource of joy. They're fighters, too. I love their spirit. And when the president was getting just this hit and that hit, the family stayed close. And, you know, they just kept the faith. This is a wonderful, wonderful, phenomenal human being. And I'm so glad that I've known him, and I'm going to help him. But more importantly, what you saw tonight, and I hope every American, especially the young people today, I hope they can find joy in seeing what a real, true public servant is all about. He put his country first. He said, I want to do this for the country.
Donna Brazil with us tonight as well. Donna, thank you. We're getting Republican reaction tonight here as well. In fact, former President Donald Trump was back on the campaign trail tonight, holding a rally in Charlotte, North Carolina. Trump has been attacking President Biden over his decision to withdraw from the race, and he has now turned his attacks to Vice President Kamala Harris. Here again on that, Rachel Scott tonight.
With the eyes of the world on the White House, tonight in North Carolina, Donald Trump plowing ahead with his campaign, taking the stage for the first time since Sunday's political earthquake. President Biden out of the race. Vice President Kamala Harris, now Trump's new opponent.
Kamala Harris is unfit to lead. She's unfit to lead. She'll destroy our country in a year.
Trump, who spent years attacking Biden, now quickly trying to recalibrate to focus on Harris, zeroing in on her role in the administration. Harris tasked with addressing the root causes of migration at the southern border.
With all of the things they've done wrong, everything, the borders are. When you look at how bad they are, you say, you know, I like Trump, but now I really like Trump because we don't want to go back.
But several Republican members of Congress now taking aim at Harris's identity as the first woman of color to serve as vice president, labeling her a DEI hire, shorthand for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I think she was a DEI hire.
100%. She was a DEI hire.
Sources tell ABC News House Speaker Mike Johnson has privately warned Republicans to stop.
This is not personal with regard to Kamala Harris.
and her ethnicity or her gender have nothing to do with this whatsoever.
Today in the New York Times, Hillary Clinton writing of Harris, "I know she can defeat Donald Trump." But Clinton adding, "I know a thing or two about how hard it can be for strong women candidates to fight through the sexism and double standards of American politics." Noting Harris will face unique additional challenges as the first Black and South Asian woman to be at the top of a major party's ticket. And on social media, Clinton showing this 2021 clip of Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, disparaging Harris for not having children.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
Hillary Clinton's reaction, what a normal, relatable guy who certainly doesn't hate women having freedoms. But here in North Carolina, Trump supporters we spoke to say they're worried about the new excitement Harris could bring to the race.
Do you think it could be more of a challenge for Trump that Harris is on the ticket?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think Harris will. Like I say, I think she'll bring new life into the party for the Democrats. And looking at, the last couple of weeks or couple months especially, how everything's gone haywire, they're going to try to find unity in it. And I think that she'll, give them that lift.
Really interesting to hear from Democrats and Republicans that they believe that Kamala Harris, whether you're going to support her or not, is injecting new energy into this race. Rachel, I wanted to ask you about something that just came out moments ago, this image. I know you're read in on this. Apparently Donald Trump watching President Biden in the Oval Office a short time ago. And what are you learning?
Yeah, David, the former president wrapped up his rally here in North Carolina just minutes before President Biden gave this Oval Office address. And the former president then got on his plane, and these pictures floating around from his own campaign advisors of the former president watching President Biden give this speech from the White House. Even though President Biden is not even in the race anymore, it is clear that he has been top of mind for Donald Trump. For the last few days, even though Biden has been out of the race, Trump has been railing and attacking President Biden. He has spent the last 600 days focused on this rematch with President Biden. And now, of course, he's trying to readjust and focus on Vice President Kamala Harris. That is proving to be a little bit of a challenge, David.
Well, talk to us a little bit about that, because today was the first time we actually saw Donald Trump since Kamala Harris became his true opponent here, now at the top of the ticket. And he had said earlier this week on a call with reporters that, now we've got to start all over, essentially, visibly frustrated that Joe Biden had stepped down from the race.
Visibly frustrated, he's been airing out his grievances about President Biden stepping aside in this race, essentially saying that, in his own words, that he has to start all over again now with a new rival that he has to figure out a way to attack. Look, Donald Trump wanted it to be President Biden, especially given all of the questions about his mental fitness and his age coming off of that debate where they believe that the president performed very poorly in that debate. And so now they're trying to switch gears and try and test out new lines against Vice President Kamala Harris. We know that this is something that the campaign had been bracing for a number of weeks now, clearly picking up on the cues and the growing pressure on President Biden to step aside. But this is now their reality, and they're drilling in and trying to figure out their new attack on Vice President Kamala Harris, David.
Rachel Scott with us here again tonight. Rachel, thank you. Of course, the next president will face a number of world conflicts, including the Israel-Hamas war, the president urging a ceasefire in Gaza, and the return of all hostages. Of course, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Donald Trump, all three of them are expected to have meetings with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu while he's here in the U.S. He addressed that joint meeting of Congress today in Washington. Protests on the outside in Washington, a warm welcome inside. Let's bring in our Chief Global Affairs Correspondent, Martha Raddatz, co-anchor of This Week. And Martha, the next president also inherits not only the issues here at home, the economy, immigration, abortion rights, but these conflicts, Israel, Gaza, Russia, and Ukraine, and of course, rising concern over China.
Exactly, David. In fact, today, for what we believe is the first time, U.S. jets, NORAD jets, intercepted Chinese bombers and two Russian bombers off the coast of Alaska. As far as we know, that has not happened in recent times. That was just off the coast of Alaska, about a 150-mile area on that coastline. So that is something that President Biden has certainly been briefed on. But what he really has to do in these coming months is concentrate solely on being president, because it can be a very vulnerable time if you are, in fact, a lame duck president. The world will be watching. Our adversaries will be watching. He also wants badly for that Gaza war to end and for the hostages to return home. Benjamin Netanyahu did not mention a ceasefire today, but we know that negotiations are doing fairly well. They believe they may be in the closing stages of that, according to a U.S. official. Sadly, we have heard that before, and it hasn't happened, but we have had many hostages released. David?
Martha Raddatz with us tonight as well. Thank you, Martha, as always. When we come back on this ABC News special report tonight, Terry Moran is standing by on the state of this race tonight. The new polls, the new national polls just out in the last 24 hours. Where does this race now stand between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris? The numbers have been eye-opening. We're also going to hear from Reince Priebus tonight. He was the former chief of staff to Donald Trump, former head of the RNC, on what the Republican Party, what Republican leaders are saying behind closed doors tonight. What do they make of the new polls? Do they think Kamala Harris is a formidable candidate? We'll hear from the Republican side and the state of this race, these new numbers, in just a moment. Here, stay tuned.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, a Father's Secret, the all-new season on Hulu.
All right, let the dogs out, please.
I don't think he's going to give you a hard time.
Even if he gives me a hard time, I'm the right guy. I want to make sure that we all learn together.
Calm, confident.
Calm, confident, calm, surrender.
Everything that he's taught has become a reality.
Yeah.
We are so grateful and impressed.
I feel like crying. You changed our world.
It is a beautiful thing to see. As you rehabilitate the dog, you also rehabilitate you.
Susan Powell was a young, beautiful mother. She just one night vanished.
Where is Susan?
July 29th, making sure that if something happens to me, our assets are documented.
Josh, did you kill your wife? I'll never forget the first time that I met him. A chill just raced up through my spine. I just shook the hand of the killer.
Now, stunning details.
He ends up revealing the biggest bombshell.
What will happen next? 2020, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, a Father's Secret, the all-new season on Hulu.
Hey, good morning, America. Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Are you ready? They are ready. Covering the biggest events in the country right now.
There's a lot going on here this morning.
You don't just see it, you feel it.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
I'll be here.
I am here and so happy.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
Michael, George, Clara,
Ginger.
Much of it.
Welcome back to our live coverage tonight, a remarkable night in the race for president. I wanted to bring you up to speed on something that was just released. It's a handwritten note, actually, from the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. She's posted it on social media, and she writes, "To those who never wavered, to those who refused to doubt, to those who always believed, my heart is full of gratitude. Thank you for the trust you put in Joe. Now it's time to put that trust in Kamala. Love, Jill." That's the first public reaction from Jill Biden, and it comes just moments after her husband addressed the nation from the Oval Office, offering his own words, his own explanation as to why he will not seek re-election. I want to get right to Terry Moran tonight on the state of this race because we've got some new polls out in recent days, Terry. I know you've been looking into these numbers. These are polls that have been taken after President Biden dropped out of the race on Sunday, and it looks like we really do have a race in our hands.
We do. No surprise, we're still a 50-50 country, but it is interesting to see these first polls, their first look at polls taken among registered voters since Biden withdrew. And take a look. That poll released yesterday by Reuters shows Kamala Harris with a small lead. And then today, CNN releasing a poll showing Donald Trump with the edge over Kamala Harris in that poll. It's worth noting, however, in that poll, the previous CNN poll was between Biden and Trump. Trump had a 6-point lead in that one. But really, you're looking at, within the margin of error, both of those polls, a dead heat.
Terry Moran with us here tonight. Terry, thank you. I want to turn now to former Chief of Staff to Donald Trump and former head of the RNC, ABC News contributor Reince Priebus, also here with us tonight. And Reince, the Trump campaign, it's been reported, would have preferred to continue to run against President Biden. Is that the case?
Well, look, I think they'll take it either way, but certainly Joe Biden was hemorrhaging, and it's obvious. And tonight, one of the most remarkable things about this speech was that Joe Biden didn't address the elephant in the room. He didn't explain to anyone listening why, in fact, he decided to step down. A month ago, we saw a disastrous debate. And then a week after that, all of the Democratic leadership were saying that Joe Biden was sharp as a tack. And he didn't address what happened this weekend. Why did he decide to step down? And it's very clear. We all know the answer. The answer he decided to step down was that this was a political decision. He decided that he didn't think he could win. And so he handpicked his vice president. And someone that didn't receive a single vote in a primary, never received a delegate. Certainly, she's accomplished. She's a former, DA, attorney general, senator. I don't have a beef with that, but clearly this was a political decision. And it's very bizarre to me that he didn't address the elephant in the room, which is his health. And if he's not healthy to run, is he healthy to be president? I'm not making an accusation. I'm just saying he should have addressed that issue tonight, and he did not.
I'm curious, Reince, though, on the issue of age and, mental fitness. Do you think the Democrats have flipped the switch here now that Donald Trump is the older candidate in this race at 78, 79 years old?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, I just saw Donald Trump play 18 holes with Bryson yesterday, and he looked pretty good to me. So I don't think this is going to be an issue. I do think in the end, it will come down to the issues. It will come down to the border. It'll come down to the economy. Kamala Harris is going to have to answer for where we are as a country and what was really driving the bad numbers for Joe Biden in the first place, which was gas and groceries, the border, and the economy. So those issues will eventually bubble up. It'll be a close race, 40,000 votes in 3 states. No doubt about it. It'll be nip and tuck from here on out.
Those are modern-day presidential elections. You believe down to tens of thousands of votes will make this decision in the key battlegrounds. Let me ask you, though, Reince, you were just looking at those numbers, too. I'm sure Terry Moran reporting on the state of the race. You got the Reuters Ipsos poll showing Kamala Harris nationally, and, of course, this all depends on the battlegrounds. We haven't seen battleground polling yet. Kamala Harris actually leading by 2 points nationally now. The CNN poll, Donald Trump leading by 3 points, though that is shrinking significantly from when it was Joe Biden versus Donald Trump in the last couple of weeks. What has changed here now with Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket for you as far as Republican strategy?
She's a shiny new object, David. I mean, she's going to have a little bit of a honeymoon period here. We'll see how long it lasts. She's got a little bump in the polls, not enough to clearly overtake President Trump. It's who knows who's ahead or behind. It'll come down to a few votes. But ultimately, I really do think that the Democrats dumped one set of baggage off and picked up another, because in the end, this is going to come down to how people feel about the direction of the country. So they're going to do everything they can to make it about Donald Trump. Donald Trump's going to make it everything about the economy and the fact that Harris is pretty liberal, far more liberal than Joe Biden, and we'll see where it goes.
Reince Priebus with us tonight, as always. Reince, we always appreciate your analysis. And as Reince points out, the race for the White House may have changed, but the key issues will remain the same. It's going to be a very close race, likely. The economy, immigration, abortion rights, crime. Violent crime has been dropping for months now across the U.S. Let's bring in our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, because, Pierre, obviously, and you've been covering politics and justice in this country for a long time, you know that even as the numbers come down, the rhetoric doesn't always match the numbers. And it truly comes down to how the American people feel when they go to the polls.
Yes, David, when you talk about the issue of crime, the issue that is of most concern to Americans is gun violence. Donald Trump had a huge surge in gun violence in the final year of his administration, including a stunning spike in mass shootings. That surge continued in the first year of Biden's presidency. So his administration has to own that. But in the last 2 years, the crime violence has been dropping and is down double digits so far this year, with mass shootings down dramatically. But in an election year, perception is what matters. And according to Gallup, the percentage of Americans who worry a great deal about crime and violence has grown from 42% in 2020 to 53% in 2024.
Pierre Thomas with a fact check there on when it comes to crime, the current federal numbers in this country. Again, numbers are one thing. The arguments in these final months are another. Pierre, thank you. Donald Trump, the Republicans wasting no time going after Vice President Harris on the issue of immigration. ABC's Maria Villarreal joins us now from the border tonight. And Maria, polls show that immigration is a major issue for Republicans, Democrats, independents, really across the board of this country. Americans want this addressed.
That's absolutely right, David. A new ABC poll shows that immigration is at the top of a priority list for Americans around the country. Listen, when we talk to people, they say that this is important to them because when they see apprehensions high and resources strained, it makes them feel like the chaos is creating a vulnerability for our country. But as you know, David, we know the Biden administration talked about coming to a compromise on a border security deal months ago, and that was shot down. It fizzled out when Trump got involved and said, listen, this is my issue. I want to run on immigration. And he did that. We saw that after the June debate or during the June debate. We also saw that at the Republican National Convention just last week. We also saw a number of speakers at the RNC try and capitalize on those immigration fears, talking about how the border chaos was actually co-aligning with crime in our country and also fentanyl deaths. But really, the facts do not support that kind of narrative. There is no information, no data out there that says that there is a crime surge because of migrants or that it contributes to fentanyl deaths in our country.
And the likely debate that we'll hear moving forward in these coming months will involve President Biden. Of course, Kamala Harris, part of the administration, so she'll be asked about the president's executive action, Maria, which came just not so long ago. And people will say, why did you wait until just before the election? The Democrats will likely say, well, they believe that President Trump stopped that bipartisan deal.
You know, David, that's exactly right. Listen, this administration hasn't really taken on immigration as a topic head on. I doubt that we will see that moving forward. But, you know, listen, we are talking about VP Kamala Harris being a former prosecutor. She lives and dies, right, by statistics and facts. So I can imagine while she may not take immigration on solely, she will use a lot of that immigration statistical information that she is privy to as a way to fact check the former president.
Maria, thanks so much. We talked earlier about the state of this race, the new national polls that show the race actually tightening almost immediately. I want to bring back in Rachel Scott into the conversation tonight, because in this new CNN poll tonight, which showed Donald Trump ahead by 3 points, and again, the CNN poll not so long ago actually showed him ahead by much more than that up against President Biden. But this also took a look at some key voting groups, and it showed in those areas the distance between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is now shrinking when it comes to young voters, when it comes to black voters, Hispanic, Latino voters, and when it comes to women. Take us through the numbers.
Yeah, and any one of these key demographics can propel either candidate to the White House, David. You said it yourself. We now have a race on our hands, so I want to take you through some of these numbers. In April and June, Donald Trump was up 7 points among young voters. Now Harris is up 4 points. Among black voters, President Biden was up 47, Harris 63. Hispanic voters, Donald Trump was up 9 points in April and June. Now Trump is up 2. So clearly Harris, they're tightening that lead a little bit. And then female voters, April and June, it was even between President Biden and former President Donald Trump. Now you have Harris up 5 points. This is a race that is very tight. It was close before, David. It's getting even tighter now.
Rachel Scott with us with a deeper dive on the numbers tonight. Rachel, thank you. When we come back on our special, a member of our own team was in the Oval Office tonight with President Biden delivering that historic address, a witness to history, and we'll get his reaction, what he witnessed in the Oval Office watching the president right after the break here.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, a father's secret. The all-new season on Hulu.
There is a price to be paid every time a survivor shares their story. I will not be silenced.
Do you feel the church accepted abuse?
I wouldn't say accepted it as so much pretended it didn't exist.
Yep, that's him.
Yep.
Ready? Kira Phillips with ABC News. Does your church protect sexual predators?
The powerful new Impact by Nightline. Secrets of the 2x2 Church.
There's nothing pretty about hearing this.
Now streaming on Hulu.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different. If you could have the Brat Pack name not exist, would you? I hated the Brat Pack. What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense?
Andrew?
I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything.
Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium.
1985, I think we could have.
Susan Powell was a young, beautiful mother. She just one night vanished.
Where is Susan?
July 29th, making sure that if something happens to me, our assets are documented.
Josh, did you kill your wife? I'll never forget the first time that I met him. A chill just raced up through my spine. I just shook the hand of the killer.
Now, stunning details.
He ends up revealing the biggest bombshell.
What will happen next? 2020, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Before we go tonight, I want to bring in our Washington Bureau Chief and Political Director, Rick Klein. Rick, as you know, the networks that cover the White House, I'm just explaining for folks at home, there's always one network that's the pool network for these big moments. Tonight, ABC was the pool, which put you right in the room, right in the Oval Office, a witness to history tonight. What did you make of it?
Yeah, David, it was remarkably emotional and intimate. The Oval Office is not a big place. There are about 40 people in there, maybe about 10 or 12 members of the Biden family watching intently to see the president's daughter, Ashley Biden, watching with her eyes closed, grabbing her mother's hand at one point, Jill Biden, Hunter Biden, the grandchildren, all watching, nodding intently, slowly, as they took in the gravity of the moment. And when the president wrapped up his remarks, they broke into spontaneous applause. Many of his own aides in the room just felt overcome by that moment. And the president stood next to his wife, who came over to him next to the Resolute desk and said, this was the honor of a lifetime.
Rick Klein, our Washington Bureau Chief, in the Oval Office tonight. Rick, extraordinary to have witnessed that. And Jill Biden saying moments ago, thank you for the trust you put in Joe. Love, Jill. I'm David Muir in New York. I'll see you tomorrow for World News Tonight. From all of us here at ABC News, good night.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, a father's secret. The all-new season on Hulu.
Susan Powell was a young, beautiful mother. She just one night vanished.
Where is Susan?
July 29th, making sure that if something happens to me, our assets are documented.
Josh, did you kill your wife? I'll never forget the first time that I met him. A chill just raced up through my spine. I just shook the hand of the killer.
Now, stunning details.
He ends up revealing the biggest bombshell.
What will happen next? 2020, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Reporting from the Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee, I'm Kana Whitworth. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Tonight, President Biden addresses the nation.
My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. Nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
President of the United States speaks to the country just days after announcing his withdrawal from the 2024 race, ultimately giving his endorsement to Vice President Kamala Harris. The message the president delivered tonight as he works to cement his legacy for decades to come.
There is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now.
And while Democrats may be celebrating the president's decision to step aside, top congressional Republicans are using it to call for his resignation. We have fresh reaction from the White House and from Capitol Hill on this special edition of ABC News Live Prime. Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. This is our special coverage. President Biden, the decision. The president spoke to the American people for 11 minutes from the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. His move to step aside mid-campaign is unprecedented, but he says he's doing so because this is a rare moment in history, calling it an inflection point, saying, quote, "The decisions we make now will determine the fate of our nation and the world for decades to come."
America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division. We have to decide, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect, freedom, justice, and democracy?
The president then tipped his hand a bit, saying how he wants to see the country move forward.
You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now.
Biden then went further, making no secret who he believes should lead be the next president of the United States.
And I will keep fighting for my cancer moonshot so we can end cancer as we know it, because we can do it. And I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform, because this is critical to our democracy, Supreme Court reform.
The president also made it clear there's still so much more that he intends on accomplishing during his final 6 months in office. We'll have fresh reaction to the president's speech, what he says about his plans for the remainder of his term, the praise he heaps onto his vice president, Kamala Harris, and how congressional lawmakers and Donald Trump are reacting tonight. But we are joined now. Oh, and first, I actually want to hear directly from First Lady Jill Biden, who wrote this heartfelt message on X, writing, quote, "To those who never wavered, to those who refused to doubt, to those who always believed, my heart is full of gratitude. Thank you for the trust you put in Joe. Now it's time to put that trust in Kamala. Love, Jill." Clearly an emotional moment for not only the president, but his family, staff, and the entire White House. And for more on that, I want to go to ABC News Chief White House Correspondent Mary Bruce, who joins us live from the White House tonight. And Mary, at one point you described that 11-minute speech as a love letter that he had written to his country.
It certainly felt like that. You know, Joe Biden describing not just what's at stake in this moment in our country, but why it is so important and why he made this decision, this selfless and, as many have described it, patriotic decision to put aside his personal interests for what he says is the good of the country. The president saying nothing can get in the way of saving our democracy, including personal ambition. And the president did make clear that, yes, you know, he still has work to do. And part of finishing the job, he made very clear, is now making sure that Kamala Harris is finishing his work, that she will be the one who inherits and wins the White House and goes on to continue the work that he has been doing. The president tonight, I think, really striking an interesting tone. It was very much, you know, not so much explaining the details of this decision, not explaining, you know, in detail everything he wants to get done over the next 6 months, though he did tick those things off. This was a chance for him to appeal directly to Americans, to voters. And I keep thinking about what he said at the end. He said, the choice is up to you. The future of the country is now in your hands, Linsey.
And talk to us about the cheers that you could hear from the front lawn there at the White House.
Yeah, we know that inside the Oval Office, as the president gave that address, were members of his family sitting there watching, taking in all of this remarkable moment of history. But so too were here at the White House hundreds of staffers, about 500 staffers. They gathered here earlier in the day. We saw them walking over from the executive office building here to the actual White House residence, and they watched this historic address from in there. And then moments after the address wrapped, as we were on the air, we heard this huge uproar, this applause and cheering. It was very clear what was likely happening. And then that voice that I have heard many, many times, the president clearly saying, "Hello, hello, hello." And our producer, Molly Nagel, ran over, listened in underneath the window, and heard the president very clearly thanking his team, who have spent so much time and energy and who love him dearly as he makes this remarkable turn and really cements his legacy. Not only, you know, was this a chance for the president to preserve his legacy by stepping out of this race in the way he did, but truly it will define it, Linsey.
And Mary, we were together in Milwaukee for the RNC. Then you went back to Milwaukee for Kamala Harris's first campaign rally, running for president. Have you seen any shift in her demeanor since going from #2 to presidential candidate?
Can't get enough of Milwaukee, Linsey. But the vice president now top of the ticket. There is a real change here. Look, she is having to redefine herself. She's having to reintroduce herself to the American people. They know her as vice president. They know her as a running mate. They know her as a previous candidate for president, but not in this way. I mean, in 3 days, she has now become the presumptive Democratic nominee. That is an astounding sprint, and it has changed. I mean, the feeling in that room was palpable. The energy was palpable. The crowd was enthusiastic. They were fired up. There were a lot of women, no surprise here, a lot of black women, extremely excited at the possibility that now a woman could actually have a shot at being president again. And her tone was different. Look, the vibe is all different on this campaign. It was clear from the moment Kamala Harris took the stage that this is a whole new race. What isn't different, though, is the issues that she's running on. The issues and the policies and the substance of this campaign. What is different, though, is the messenger and certainly the way in which it is being conveyed to the American people, Linsey.
Mary Bruce from the White House tonight. Our thanks to you, Mary.
Thank you.
Our Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl joins us now. And John, while much of this certainly was political and about certainly cementing his legacy as president, it also seemed very personal. It talked about how he was that kid with a stutter from Scranton, Pennsylvania, ascending to the Oval Office.
And it was wistful. I mean, he talked about how much he reveres that office. I mean, think about it. This is somebody who spent most of his adult life, and perhaps as a kid too, dreaming of being president of the United States and working to make it happen. And to give it all up. I mean, he's not resigning as president, but he is giving up his opportunity to run for re-election. He made it clear that, in his view, that his record merits another 4 years, and that he was making this move because it was in the name of party unity. But you could hear almost the pain and anguish in his voice for having done that, and putting it in the context of portraying it as the ultimate selfless act, making the case the country is much greater than any one man's ambition, which of course it is.
And certainly he talked about how this is an inflection point and how this moment will determine the fate of our nation. I'm curious if you feel that the chatter, particularly from a number of Republicans, as far as him, if he doesn't have the mental acuity to be the nominee, doesn't have the mental acuity to run the country at this time, do you think, is there anything he could have said tonight that might put that to rest?
I don't think there was anything he could have said that will put that to rest. But there's a reality, too, that Republicans have something more immediate that they have to worry about, which is running against Kamala Harris. So you're going to hear that chatter. You will absolutely hear the calls for him to resign as president. But guess what? The House of Representatives has some votes tonight, and then they're gone until September. So we won't have Republican House members making any efforts to do anything about that, at least not for the next month and a half while they are on recess. But you mentioned the inflection point, and I think that was, to me, the line that stood out, maybe above all lines, in that we are at an inflection point, and that the decisions that we make now will affect the course of American history and world history for decades to come, something that is almost certainly true given how deep the divide is in this election. And when you talk about Biden's legacy, this will either be seen as the ultimate selfless act, or it'll be looked at as something that should have happened much, much earlier. It'll depend on whether or not Kamala Harris wins in November. If Kamala Harris wins in November, Joe Biden will be remembered as to some degree as the statesman that gave it all up in the name of the country, in the name of the unity of his party. If they lose, the question will be asked, why did he run again, and why did he take so long to make this decision to get out of the race?
And just lastly, we also heard from him with regard to the 6 months ahead, the things that he's still committed to, among them revamping the Supreme Court, that cancer moonshot, strengthening NATO. How does he accomplish anything else that remains on his agenda, as far as he's talked about finishing the job, when he has a House that's Republican controlled, and many are going to largely view him now as a lame duck president?
And the Middle East, he very much wants to get to a ceasefire agreement, release of the hostages in the Middle East. He's got a very busy agenda for the next 6 months. Some of that can be accomplished regardless of what is happening in Congress. He can play his role as a world leader, but he's a world leader who has now told the world that he was essentially unable to continue a presidential campaign, and he will be, looked at as a diminished president as a result. So it's a good question, and Kamala Harris is going to be out on the campaign trail. These are his decisions, not hers.
Jonathan Karl, our thanks to you as always.
Thank you.
Joining us now for more is Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar. Senator, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You've known President Joe Biden for some time, briefly serving with him in the Senate as well. One can only imagine just how difficult this decision must have been for him. Joe Biden saying tonight that the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. What did you make of his speech?
I thought it was a beautiful speech. I think, to me, it reminded me of when he came into the office. He came into the office as someone who said he was going to save our democracy, and he did. He beat Donald Trump. He was there on the inaugural stage, and he talking about the soul of America and bringing people together. He didn't accomplish that entirely, but boy, he saved our democracy. And he put that out as a challenge to the American people tonight when he quoted Benjamin Franklin and said, "It's a republic if you can keep it." I also am someone that loved that he talked about passing the torch. As a young senator, I remember one of my first speeches on domestic violence. I was in the chamber late at night, and no one was in there. I think the pages were falling asleep. And I walked out and my phone rang, and I thought, is it my mom? Then I thought, no, my mom didn't even stay up to watch this. And it was Joe Biden. He, at the time, had just gotten out of the presidential race, and he took the time as a senator to call me, and he said, "Hey, kid, that was a great speech." And when Kamala went to Delaware, he kind of said the same thing. He said, "You got this, kid." That was him. That was him tonight, and I couldn't have been more proud of his decision. He took the honorable path.
Were you surprised by his decision?
I was not. I think this was mounting. As Jeff, who you just talked to, I think he was well aware of what was going on, a lot of discussions, and he ultimately decided that this was best for our democracy. And I just think he did it with grace, and he didn't waste time. He endorsed Kamala Harris right away, meeting with my Republican colleagues today and talking to a number of them that run the gamut ideologically. I think they have been really shocked at how quickly she consolidated her support, how quickly people came together and endorsed her. The joy that's out there right now of young people that say, hey, now generational change, I'm ready for this. Those were a lot of the people that were hanging on the sidelines, not yet ready to accept this candidacy, understandably having gone through the pandemic. She's going to be able to make the case for them. So while this is about beating Donald Trump and the negativity that he brings, the divisiveness that he brings, the breaching of our freedoms, what happened with Roe v. Wade, it is also about what she is going to bring to the table. And that is what I'm excited to see unfold in these next few weeks.
And tonight, Biden called Kamala Harris experienced, tough, and capable. You served with her in the Senate as well. How would you describe her?
She is someone that I always think about her posture. She is very, very stands straight and keeps her shoulders high. She is someone that just doesn't let the criticism get to her. She has a mission and she completes it. I watched her dismantle those Supreme Court justice nominees to show their true colors, which ended up being exactly right. So you're going to see on one side of a debate stage, if he is willing to debate her, you're going to see her making the case on what happened with those justices. And you're going to see him, who just did a video this year that said he was proud to be the person who overturned Roe v. Wade. Those are his words, not my words. You're going to see her, as a former prosecutor, make the case for the rule of law. And on the other side of the stage will be someone that has racked up over 100 felony indictments and a number of convictions as well. So I think you're going to see a very strong contrast. But sometimes what gets missed here is there's a joy about Kamala Harris. I ran against her. We became better friends as the election went on. I've seen her and Doug together. My husband and I have hung out with them. And I think you're just going to see someone who also has a joy about her that I think we need in our politics right now.
And what types of qualities do you think that she should be looking for as she tries to choose a vice presidential candidate, especially on an expedited timeline?
Sure. So I think number one, someone she can trust. Number two, someone that can just step in and govern. And number three, someone who augments her skills. It is speed dating. That is true. She is not going to be on the timeline of other people. But all of the candidates that I've seen on the list of the top ones have been vetted by voters. They've been vetted in tough races. I'm not as concerned about that. Because of who she's looking at, the quality of who she's looking at. And then finally, she knows them. She knows every single one of them. So it's not going to be like, hey, I've never met you before. Do you want to be my running mate? That's not what this scenario is going to be like.
Comments that were made by former President Gerald Ford in 1989 have recently resurfaced. And Ford was asked by a young schoolgirl what advice he'd give to a young lady who wanted to become president. And he said, it won't happen in the normal course of events. He thought that it would take an event like a president dying for a woman to become president. And I'm just curious, 35 years later, what you make of that response.
Well, I think I was the one on the debate stage at one point who said, if it was easy for a woman to become president, we could play a game called Name Your Favorite Woman President. And not only could we not play that game until Kamala came in, we couldn't even play the game of Name Your Favorite Woman Vice President. So we know this has been tough. Women have been held to different standards. After that race was over, there was some people looked at social media and they saw the kind of criticism that were lodged at the women candidates compared to the male candidates, really getting at looks, really getting at in a way that none of the men had to deal with, getting at if someone, they loved it when they could say you were dumb. They loved it when they could say you were too tough. Those were the kinds of things that went viral. So one of the good things for Kamala right now is that we've been through this before with Trump and how he handled what he said about Hillary Clinton. Everyone knows what went on there. What happened to her in her past races. We're pretty attuned to this. And I think it's not just Kamala that will be defending herself. There will be an entire brigade of people that are ready to either call it out, laugh at it, embrace it, or most importantly, ignore it. Because the cause, as the president laid out in his beautiful words today, the cause of defending democracy is larger than yourself. That is the deal, larger than any personal ambition, as he so beautifully pointed out, and certainly larger than any one person.
Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, we thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's great to be on. Thank you.
Tonight was certainly a personal moment for the president as he laid out his remarks just back after a COVID diagnosis, just days from deciding to step aside from the 2024 race. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me, it's about you.
Our Chief Global Affairs anchor Martha Raddatz joins us now. Martha, the president left time in his speech to say which accomplishments abroad in particular made him proud. Tell us about that.
Well, I think certainly he talked a lot about Ukraine, and we go back and we remember those early days, and the administration talked so much about what was about to come, and that was a big decision within the administration, within the national security apparatus. They had intelligence showing Russia was going to those borders, and they wanted to convince people that this was going to happen, and that helped, and the president certainly talked about that tonight, bring NATO together, and the president has really helped reunite NATO in ways that it started to kind of fall apart in the previous administration, because they were clear that if you want to be protected, you have to pay more. Didn't really fall apart, but it really started to mistrust in many ways whether this alliance could survive, whether they would continue to get the support. And I think they're in that way now, and very much watching the presidential race. But President Biden is very proud of helping to reunite NATO and face up to the threat from Russia and be tough. on Russia and side with the Ukrainians in not backing down. Now, where that goes in the next six months, Linsey, is another question altogether. I mean, does Putin become bolder because President Biden now is essentially a lame duck president? And I think that's, in a way, a very vulnerable time for the nation. I mean, he clearly doubled down on that tonight, that his attention would be focused on his job as president. But it is a time when the adversaries can look at the United States in a way they weren't a week ago.
All right, Martha Raddatz, our thanks to you. And now I want to bring in former DNC chair and ABC News contributor Donna Brazile, who, of course, knows Joe Biden very well. Donna, your reaction to President Biden's address to the nation?
I thought it was very heartfelt. 11 minutes. It was short, but it was so impactful. What he told the nation was his love of his country, his desire to complete his job, his determination to see a new generation with new voices and new faces to rise. He stepped back so that those who believe in freedom can step forward. He stepped back so that we can see the bridge that we've been trying to cross over. He stepped back so that the 21 million Americans who got health insurance, the 15.7 million Americans who found jobs after COVID, he stepped back so that we can continue that progress. I know there will be people out there in the country that just will never understand Joe Biden, why he ran in the first place and why he decided to step down after 3 weeks and 3 days of taking on, criticism from his friends, from people inside his tent, his party. It's been a very deep and very troubling time. But, the faith that he has, not just in a higher being, but the faith he has in us, the American people, that came through, Linsey, in those 11 minutes. So I've already sent my congratulations, Mr. President. We still love you. We still have your back. You still got a lot of work to do, so don't go get some chocolate chip ice cream. Don't go get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, Mr. President. Mr. President, continue to fight. You're not finished the work. Linsey, this whole thing about passing the torch, from the Greek literature, it's the runners. But Moses had 40 years, and he had to pass the torch. I am so proud of Joe Biden, because not many men in my life have given up power, let alone give up their power and their war chest to a woman. But over the last 3.5 years, this much I know, and I tell everybody, Kamala Harris is a proven leader. She's ready. She's not ready just because of her education. She's not ready because she was a DA in California, AG in California, United States Senator, but she has been a governing partner with Joe Biden for the last 3.5 years. She has traveled to over 20 countries. She knows over 150 leaders. You can't get that experience while just running your mouth. You get it by putting in the work. She has receipts, and I'm proud, so very proud of the Biden family. They took this with grace. They never once expressed horror or grievance. They're like, we're going to keep fighting, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to Joe Biden and his leadership.
There was a moment tonight where President Biden asked the critical question, does character in public life still matter? And also referred to his humble beginnings. Let's take a listen.
My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. Nowhere else on earth could a kid with a stutter, from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, one day sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. But here I am.
I want to ask you in particular what you made of that question about does character in public life still matter?
It matters a great deal. Remember when Joe Biden entered the national public life, he lost his wife, a child. 2 of his sons had deep injuries. He had to put his life back. He suffered an aneurysm. He had to put his life back. He's had so many setbacks, but it never stopped him from making the American dream available to each and every one of us. When Joe Biden talks about his struggle with stuttering, I think about all of the kids in this country, all of the adults that have to overcome their disabilities, overcome their shortcomings, and yet can face tomorrow with joy, with the belief that you can still walk, you can still contribute. You know, I'm not close to 81 yet, Linsey, but I tell you one thing, if the good Lord gives me as many years as the Lord has given Joe Biden, I hope I have his character, his decency, his kindness, and his willingness to sacrifice to let a new generation go over that bridge. Joe Biden has brought us so close to what we want in America, an America that sees everybody. The stuttering little boy from Scranton, the little girl from Kenner, Louisiana that was too dark to go someplace, and yet this is a country that sees all of us. The guy from the other side of the mountain, Mr. Vance, the little girl with pigtails in Oakland riding her bike. This is who we are. And if we can celebrate just the fact that we come from everywhere and we are a little bit of everything. None of us are perfect. If we can take the example he has set and start talking to our neighbors and talking to our friends and co-workers with love, then unity will not just be words in a speech, but unity will be part of the American fabric that we love. I love this country, and more importantly, I love politicians like Joe Biden. I am so glad he's my friend. I love Dr. Biden. I'm so glad she's my friend. These are good, honorable, decent people. So I got to get on with my work, but I tell you one thing, Joe Biden kept the faith, and I'm going to keep the faith for him as well.
Your passion comes through. It is quite evident. And lastly, before we let you go, let's just talk about what happens next. There's been a lot of conversation about torch being passed. You've expressed confidence in Democrats now rallying behind Vice President Harris. But just walk us through what happens from this point up until the roll call and the DNC and what that'll look like.
Well, we had that meeting today. And by the way, this is for those of us who are insiders. Throughout this process, Joe Biden has never lost more than 3 votes on the platform, on the rules. Credentials 0. He wasn't hemorrhaging delegates. He was hemorrhaging, or I guess the best way to describe it, some people said I didn't want him to lead the team anymore. That's fine. They made their choice. It's their conscience. But he's leaving this party in good hands and good shape, and the vice president knows how to not just row the boat, but she knows how to include more people, because we're going to sail forward in the future. We're not going backwards. As the vice president said, we're not going back. So she will have to submit her papers, 300 signatures to place her name in nomination. I'm actually going to ask her if I can sign my name. I want my name in the history books. I want this kid from Louisiana. I want her to have her name. I want to help nominate her. I want to be one of 300. And then, of course, the process will go to the full body of the DNC, the DNCC, which is the convention delegates. We have until August 1st. If no one steps up, then it will move just a little quicker. But we all know by August 7th, we want both the president and the vice presidential nominee to be on the ballot in all 50 states in the District of Columbia. So we got a fast timeline, but we had an open, a fair, transparent process. And if you're interested in being the nominee for the Democratic Party, get your signatures, and guess what? Let the party begin.
All happening in short order. Donna Brazile, our thanks to you as always.
Thank you, ma'am.
Much more on President Biden's address straight ahead. Stay with us.
Whenever news breaks.
We are here in Israel, a nation at war after that brutal surprise attack by Hamas.
On the ground in Ukraine, reporting from Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
In rolling forward, this tornado tore through this little town.
From the most devastating disaster in Hawaii.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
In Iceland. Let's go.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
From the front lines.
From southern Israel.
Outside the Gaza Strip. In Beirut. From the FBI.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is. We're going to take you there.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live, streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning. To catch you up with what happened overnight. Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
We are part of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from different directions.
Nuclear reactor.
So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag...
Not a tear in it.
How important it made the USA.
Great work.
Hi. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ismail? David.
David.
I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, a father's secret. The all-new season on Hulu.
All right, let the dogs out, please.
I don't think he's gonna give you a hard time.
Even if he gives me a hard time, I'm the right guy.
You can handle it.
I want to make sure that we all learn together.
Calm confidence.
Calm, confident, calm, surrender.
Everything that he's taught has become a reality.
Yeah.
We are so grateful and impressed.
I feel like crying.
You changed our world.
It is a beautiful thing to see. As you rehabilitate the dog, you also rehabilitate you.
Welcome back, everyone. Taking a live look now at the White House, where not long ago the president made his address to the American people. And I want to bring back in a Washington Bureau Chief and Political Director, Rick Klein, who joins us now. And Rick, there's often a lot of discussion about being in the room where it happens. You were there tonight in the room for that Oval Office address. Just give us a sense of what that moment was like.
Yeah, Lindsay, it was powerful. It was intimate. It was even emotional at times. I was there in my capacity as bureau chief representing the networks as part of a pool rotation. You get the opportunity to watch this and to produce these events on a smaller scale basis. And just before the president spoke, members of his family, about 10 or 12 Bidens, walked into the room. First Lady Jill Biden, son Hunter, his daughter Ashley, all filed in. Several of his grandchildren. It was really remarkable to see the anticipation on their faces, and then the emotion that they seemed to digest it. His daughter watched most of the speech. Ashley Biden watched it with her eyes closed, nodding very slowly, appearing to dab her eyes at times, grabbed for her mom's hand toward the end of the speech. To see his son Hunter so much in the public eye, just a few feet off camera, just to the president's left, just outside of his sight line, but there to emotionally support him, was truly remarkable. And when the president wrapped up and the TV cameras went off, to see the room erupt in applause, many of his aides who had came in, I saw them making eye contact, just nodding at each other. They recognized what a important moment this was, and to their mind, their boss or their father or their grandfather or their husband just did something truly selfless in politics and historic in politics and beyond.
And Mary Bruce, who was on the front lawn there at the White House, at one point heard loud cheers erupting, and you were inside, so give us a sense of what was happening inside.
Yeah, I mean, there was I don't think she heard the loud one, because this was a smaller group inside the Oval Office. And Lindsay, the Oval Office isn't that big, and they have to move out a lot of furniture to make room for the TV equipment. But there were about 39 or 40 people, I think we counted, in the room, including a lot of ABC personnel, some White House staffers at all levels, with part of the production, as well as the speechwriting team and people that are close to him personally. Some of those aides that I recognize worked with him literally for decades, back to his days in the United States Senate. and they were there to support him and to witness firsthand in a way that most people will never have the opportunity to do. That group did applaud, and then the president went into a holding area with his family. When he came out, he walked out onto the White House lawn, and I don't know that he knew this was happening, but there were hundreds of staffers who were gathered, and that's where the loud applause happened that Mary was reporting on. The president took the mic and thanked people for being there, and you could tell this was a moment for anyone, whether you're a member of the Biden family or a White House staffer at any level. This was a special opportunity. So many of them have genuine affection for him as well. He's a politician that at his heart has a lot of people very loyal to him that truly love him, people that have worked with him, again, going back to the 1970s. And to see them and the way they reacted, I think was powerful on its own.
An emotional night, a historic night, to be sure. Rick Klein, our thanks to you.
Thank you.
Despite the claims by the GOP that President Biden likely isn't fit to continue in his role, he was adamant that he will finish the job. I want to bring back in ABC News White House correspondent Mary Alice. And Mary Alice, from his interview with George Stephanopoulos, where he insisted it would take an act of the Lord to come down to have him decide that he was going to drop out, until today. Why such a drastic change from the president?
Linsey, I think that question is still unanswered. The president didn't directly explain that whiplash. This was a powerful speech, an emotional speech. Clear that this was a decision that he sort of was forced into, that he had hoped he would not have to step down. But it is remarkable to think about just a few weeks ago. He said it would take an act of God. It would take a message from the Lord Almighty to step out of this race. And tonight in that Oval Office address, he didn't talk about the change of heart. He didn't talk about his health. He notably, didn't take on the questions from Republicans about whether he is still fit to serve out the next 6 months, though he insisted that he is and that he has a lot still to do. And I'm thinking, too, just about the press briefing today, where we were asking White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre about, whether he made this decision because of his health. And she, repeatedly said that was not it. But I think that he's going to still face questions about that whiplash and what ultimately led him to this decision.
All right, Mary Alice Parks, our thanks to you. I want to go now to our senior White House correspondent, Selena Wang. Selena, you're there in Houston, Texas, where VP Kamala Harris is. How has Harris hit the ground running?
Well, she has wasted no time, Linsey. She has very, very rapidly united the entire Democratic Party behind her. Her campaign has already raised record-shattering amounts, and she's already been touring the country. She was in battleground Wisconsin for a rally. Then she was in Indianapolis today speaking to a historically black sorority. And then tomorrow she's going to be here in Houston, Texas, speaking in front of a national teachers union. She's already here right now as we're speaking. And Vice President Harris now, Linsey, she is now able to redefine herself to the American public on her own terms. And we've seen her really lean into her background as a prosecutor and make the case that she can attack Donald Trump where it hurts the most. She is framing this election as one between a prosecutor versus a convicted felon. But look, her campaign knows that this is going to be a very tight race, but they believe they do have a unique advantage. They're saying that a disproportionate amount of undecided voters are Black, Latino, and young voters. All of these demographics are where they believe Vice President Kamala Harris can generate the most enthusiasm.
And some Republican members are now referring to this vice president as a diversity, equity, and inclusion, a DEI hire. Has anyone from the Democratic Party come out in her defense?
Well, Linsey, we've already seen many Democrats rush to the vice president's defense, including Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She said that these are unfounded, that she has worked for this. She rightfully deserves this role. But she did say that they need to brace themselves for the sexist and racist comments and attacks that are going to be hurled at the vice president. We also heard from Hillary Clinton. She wrote an op-ed saying that she knows a thing or two about what it's like to be a woman in American politics and to face the double standards and the sexism. But she said that Vice President Harris is going to face even additional challenges because she is the first Black woman. She is the first South Asian woman to be at the top of a party's ticket. But what's interesting here is that House Speaker Mike Johnson told Republicans, we're learning, to stop these attacks and that instead they should focus on Vice President Harris's record and her policies, Linsey.
All right, Selena Wang for us. Thanks so much, Selena. Still much more ahead on President Biden's address. Stay with us.
The ship is incredible. It feels like living in a science fiction movie.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Wow, look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, dead ahead! Hang on!
We are heading into the unknown.
Hammer, hammer, hammer. It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
All right, let the dogs out, please.
I don't think he's going to give you a hard time.
Even if he gives me a hard time, I'm the right guy. I want to make sure that we all learn together.
Calm, confident.
Calm, confident, calm, surrender.
Everything that he's taught has become a reality.
We are so grateful and impressed.
I feel like crying. You changed our world.
It is a beautiful thing to see. As you rehabilitate the dog, you also rehabilitate you.
Hey, good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Are you ready? They are ready.
Covering the biggest events in the country right now.
There's a lot going on here this morning. You don't just see it, you feel it.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
I'll be here.
I am here and so happy.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
Michael, George, Clara,
Ginger.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, a father's secret. The all-new season on Hulu.
Welcome back, everyone, to our special coverage of the president's address. Tonight, we're getting new reaction from the number 3 in the House, Majority Whip Republican Tom Emmer, who said in a statement, quote, "It's a tough sell that this decision was about democracy when the Democrats just trampled on the will of 14 million primary voters who selected Joe Biden to be their nominee." For more reaction on President Biden's speech tonight, let's bring in ABC's Jay O'Brien, who's on Capitol Hill for us. Jay, President Biden said tonight that he's ready to focus on his job as president and that he'll continue giving his heart and soul to the nation. Do you think he was able to say enough to restore confidence in those who've expressed doubt?
It doesn't look likely, Lindsey, that he's going to change any of those House Republicans' minds who have called for him to resign, saying that if he can't run for re-election, he shouldn't continue on as president. Tom Emmer is one of those. House Speaker Mike Johnson is another one. We caught up just moments ago with 2 members of the House, Tim Burchett, a Republican, Jared Moskowitz, a Democrat. We ran into them just minutes ago, right after the president's remarks were finished, and we got their reaction, particularly on that idea of should President Biden resign. Here's what they told us.
Do you think this is going to calm any calls for him to resign? Because just, Kamala Harris is now in.
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to matter. I think he'll just...
You don't really care if he resigns or not?
Well, I think we're in trouble.
What was your reaction to Biden's address? Did you watch it?
So I watched it. So he doesn't look or sound as good as he used to. But I'll tell you this. I think it was one of his best speeches. I think it'll be one of his most memorable speeches, and it was extremely moving.
Moskowitz went on to say something that we've heard from a lot of Democrats, which is framing President Biden's decision not as one about fitness for office, but as one about ability to win in November, saying that Biden made the calculation that he can't win in November, that he might not have the ability to campaign the way he needs to campaign, and that's why he made this call. We also heard tonight from former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who was one of, sources tell us, those top Democrats who were trying to push President Biden to recognize, in their view, that he couldn't win in November. She said in a statement tonight, quote, "Tonight we saw President Joe Biden, one of America's most consequential presidents, show that he is not only on the right side of history, but on the right side of the future." Lindsey.
All right, Jay O'Brien from the rotunda there on Capitol Hill. Thanks so much, Jay. Immigration, obviously a major issue for voters across our country, especially with border security. I want to bring in ABC's Maria Villarreal, who's at the border for us. And Maria, what exactly does polling show about the topic of immigration?
Linsey, that's exactly right. New ABC polling does show that immigration is a top priority for Americans in our country. People we speak with tell us this is important to them because when they see apprehension numbers up and resources strained at the border, it makes them feel like this border chaos is actually creating vulnerability in our country. Now, the Biden administration, as you know, has talked about coming to a compromise on a border security deal. That was supposed to happen months ago, but it was torpedoed when Trump said, listen, take this off the table. I want to run on this issue. And that's exactly what we have seen him do after or during the June debate, but also at the Republican National Convention as well just last week, as you heard him talk about. We also heard a number of other people that were speaking at the RNC try and capitalize on immigration fears, talking about how the chaos along the border led to a rise in crime in our country and also to fentanyl deaths. But let's just be very clear. The facts do not support that narrative. There is no evidence that points to a major surge in crime caused by recent arrivals. And additionally, while we do have issues with fentanyl in our country and fentanyl deaths, right now we know that cartels bring this drug into our country through big rigs and vehicles, not on the backs of migrants. We also want to point out that right now apprehension numbers continue to decrease in our country, especially over the last few months. I spoke to one agent out of the Eagle Pass area just this morning who says we are doing our jobs. It is manageable, but to be quite honest, right now, it is actually pretty quiet. Listen, this administration hasn't outwardly come out to try and take on the issue of immigration. I doubt that that's what VP Harris will do, but we do know that she is privy to statistics and information on the border. More than likely what we will see on the campaign trail, as well as when she takes on the former president in a debate style, she will use that information to fact check him, not necessarily make immigration her top priority when she's campaigning. Linsey?
Maria Villarreal, our thanks to you. And now I want to bring in ABC's Zareen Shah, who has closely followed Kamala Harris long before she was vice president and now a White House contender. Zareen, Harris spoke in Indianapolis today, a day after she held her debut campaign rally. Just give us a sense of her tone and also the reaction to her on the campaign trail now as a presidential contender.
You know, Linsey, I think you feel a sense of confidence, right? I mean, when you are in a place where you believe you should be, there is a freedom there. And you sort of felt that with her. You felt that shift of tone. But I got to ask this question. I mean, we know she's grown. We always ask, how much has she grown? We as a country have grown too, and sometimes I wonder how much she has changed versus how much we have changed when we look at her. These crowds are coming at her, looking at her in a completely different way, seeing her really as someone who's going to take on Donald Trump versus the person who's going to take on, 20 different candidates in a Democratic field.
And what was the reaction from the crowd?
They were just so enthusiastic. I mean, the last time I remember crowds this excited about her, I mean, it must have been like, end of summer. I remember this one event in Nevada where the crowds were so excited. They kept chanting the words, "Dude, gotta go." And she was so thrilled about that. And they were just so pumped and energetic. And there was a feeling, there was a sense that maybe she could cross that finish line and actually become the nominee in that moment.
Zareen Shah, our thanks to you as always. Joining us now is presidential historian Mark Updegrove. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. You no doubt have seen and read about presidents giving similar addresses months before the end of their terms. How does this one measure up?
I think it's a good speech, Linsey. It was a very good speech. And no surprise, Joe Biden came back time and time again to the issue of democracy. That's why he went into this race to begin with. And one thing stuck out to me at the end of the speech, Linsey, when he said, "History is in your hands. Let's act together to preserve our democracy." And I think President Biden, by getting into the race in 2020, was intent on bending the currents of history, taking back the White House in order to preserve democracy from Donald Trump, who he considered and many Americans considered to be an existential threat. That was a defining moment, wresting the White House from Donald Trump. I think the other defining moment for his presidency will be stepping aside and passing the torch to Kamala Harris, who stands a better chance of staving off another threat from Donald Trump against all odds, a resurgent Donald Trump to once again win the White House. So two defining moments bookending the Biden presidency, Linsey.
And Biden was obviously trying to cement how historians will view his presidency. Do you think that he was able to succeed in selling it?
I think in some ways, yes, because he fulfilled the promise of restoring our democracy by preserving and protecting and strengthening our democracy, by bringing us back to democratic norms and values and traditions. You also mentioned, or Martha Raddatz early in the broadcast, that he revived a very weakened NATO around the defense of Ukraine against Russian aggression. Two very significant accomplishments in restoring and preserving our democracy. But again, I think he realized that he wasn't the one to continue this fight. So his legacy, Linsey, is very much in the balance as, again, he hands off the torch to Kamala Harris to stave off another potential threat from Donald Trump.
And the fact that the president has 6 months still remaining in his term, is that much time for him to affect his legacy and for it to change?
I think he has to do everything he can to round out the administration in a noble and admirable way. Lame duck presidents can't accomplish a great deal, Linsey, as you know, having watched lame duck presidents through the years. But I think he has to do everything he can to help his heir apparent, Kamala Harris, to win the office in the fall. But the other thing he's going to have to do is show America that he is able to continue to lead, given the fact that he said that stamina is an issue. That's why he's not running again. That's why his party has asked him to step aside. So he has to continue to show the vigor, the energy, the vision to continue in the role of our president and commander-in-chief.
Presidential historian Mark Updegrove, we thank you so much as always. And as Mark just laid out for us, democracy and the fight over the republic was a key part of President Biden's speech tonight. Joining us now in studio is Biden biographer Chris Whipple, author of The Fight for His Life. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So we saw there just a little short time ago when Joe Biden sat down with George Stephanopoulos, and he said essentially it was going to take an act of God in order for him to get removed from the race. And then you saw less than roughly 3 weeks later where he did have a change of heart. You know him better than most. What do you think actually did cause that change of heart?
Well, it was an extraordinary drama that we've watched unfold over the last 72 hours. And prior to that, really, we've seen nothing like it in modern American history. What struck me tonight, to answer your question, is this was just the extraordinary grace that Joe Biden brought to this moment. It was the most difficult decision he's ever made in his career, maybe the most difficult since LBJ in 1968. But what fascinated me was the way he framed his decision. He said he was passing the torch because he wanted to unite the party. Now, if you gave Joe Biden a truth serum, he would probably say, in America, the people rule, but so does Nancy Pelosi. Now, I'm being slightly facetious, but the truth is that Joe Biden had to make a cold, hard decision last Sunday in Rehoboth Beach, and the decision he made was that there was no path forward with the Democratic Party leaders abandoning him and the party fracturing around him. That's a decision Joe Biden didn't want to make, but he made it and delivered it tonight with extraordinary grace. I mean, not a trace of bitterness.
Do you think that it was ultimately about self-sacrifice, that he was putting country over self?
Yeah, and he'll be remembered for that, for sure. I agree with Mark Updegrove. I think just as LBJ had a tremendous surge in popularity when he made that tough decision in '68, Joe Biden will too. And one of the parallels that people don't talk about very much between LBJ and Biden is that one of Lyndon Johnson's primary reasons for stepping away was because he thought that if he divorced himself from politics, he could get a peace settlement in Vietnam. I think Joe Biden is desperate to get a peace settlement in Gaza. And imagine if he's able to do that. I mean, he would actually have a crowning achievement that would surpass LBJ, who never got a peace settlement in Vietnam.
There was a subsequent interview recently where he was asked, who do you rely on, to advisors you go to help you make the decisions? And he said, me. I rely on me for that. But do you think in this case it was just a case, as the young people would say, the math just wasn't mathing, that it ultimately just came down to the numbers, or do you think that it was listening to the counsel of dear friends or perhaps family?
Yeah, I think the truth is that to this moment, I would bet you that Joe Biden believes that he could win this election. I don't think he stepped away because he thought he couldn't do that, or even because he thought he couldn't serve for the next 4 years. I think what happened was the cold, hard reality set in of a party that had abandoned him, party leaders certainly who had abandoned him. For right down to the bitter end, he believed, I think, and some of his inner circle believed, that we've done this. Time and time again, we've proved that everybody wrong, all of our critics. He'd won those battles before in 2020 when everybody said he was dead after Iowa and New Hampshire. He did it in 2022 when he defied the odds in the midterms, and he lost this last battle. And this one was something he just couldn't overcome because the party leaders had abandoned him.
Biden biographer Chris Whipple, we thank you so much for your insight. Really appreciate you joining us.
Sure.
And that's it for our special coverage of President Biden's Oval Office address. I'm Linsey Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.
Susan Powell was a young, beautiful mother. She just